that will be shared from this stage. Starting post-lunch immediately is going to be the Global Red Lentils Outlook. Our panel is already ready, so I'm going to start to introduce them one by one as they step up on the stage. And you can then, or they will rather, indulge us with their dissertations, and there'll be Q&A after you do that. Many of you have been asking what happens to the presentations. All of this will be uploaded on the website www.pulses2018, but wait for the end of this event before you start logging in and finding out more. Time to start, ladies and gentlemen. Up first is a gentleman whom you know very well. You'll see photographs of him either skiing on the toppest mountains in the world or jumping off the highest pinnacle he can find. He's also won so many awards, too many to mention, including the International Pulse Man of the Year, and also he's been mentioned in Forbes 100 people, 100 influential Indian leaders, so many amongst the many awards. He's also board member on the Dubai Food Trade Advisory Council and the president of the India Middle East Agri-Trade Investment and Investment Federation. Besides that, he also manages, as the managing director, a $1.5 billion conglomerate that's spread over 30 countries. That's Hakan Agro. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sudhakar Tomar. Up next is also a gentleman with a great deal of experience. So Sudhakar is a man of many talents. One of them, of course, he speaks extremely well, and it's also a delight to listen to. I'm going to hand over to Sudhakar the mic, so he's going to welcome the panel in his inimitable style, and we'll start this session. Over to you, Sudhakar.
Good afternoon. Hope you had a great lunch. Let me call my panelists first. Sanjeev, Mr. Rajendra, Quinton, Marve, Mr. Saif, please. And then once we sit down, we'll do nice introductions here. So welcome to Sri Lanka. As we say here, Ayu Bhavan, which is welcome. Vanakkam, Namaskar, Salam, Namaste, and good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the most important panel considering Sri Lanka imports a substantial quantity of red lentils and probably the most important pulse of the day, red lentils. Can I get this slide on the... Got it. So we are at a very interesting times, especially in the red lentils. Red lentils is very important for an important consuming country like Sri Lanka. But before we go into the red lentils, the format is like this. I have a dual role of analyst. It's a kind of conflicting role. Analyst as well as the moderator. But fortunately, I will be assisted very ably by probably the most influential panel of the whole conference. Why, I would tell you in a while. But before we do that, let me introduce my panelists first. On my immediate right is Mr. Saif. He is an industry in himself. I can't do justice by introducing him to anyone. I would reckon that in his life, he must have traded more than 50 million tons for sure. And it is still counting. That number is going to go up. After that, I have Marve from Turkey. She's a third generation trader and processor. Then I have my friend Sanjeev from Australia, as our president says, from down under. He has been exporting red lentils since pretty much 2 decades. After that, I have Mr. Rajendra, who's among the top 5 leading importers in Sri Lanka and a very large distribution center, and not only pulses, all kind of spices. So basically, when you eat the spicy lentil curry, all the ingredients, spices, lentils, everything come from his distribution setup. He's also our sponsor for the conference, other than, of course, Mr. Saif. And then I have Quinton, who is from Waitera and Glencore, and they are the largest exporter of lentils. So imagine this kind of expertise sitting in front of us. So any questions, whether they are politically correct or any confusion questions, even on the app or mic, please feel free to ask. This is your chance to get the best answers possible from the experts. So what do we get in this panel? In this panel, we'll discuss about the global production scenario. And after that, we will look at the availability of red lentils from now till the new crop in Canada, in Australia. So in next 12 to 16 months' time, how much is the availability of the red lentils or masoor whole in this 12 to 15 months' time. And then we will also look at the key demand from the major markets of Egypt, Sri Lanka, Turkey, other than, of course, the India, but let's discount that market for a while. And then you get a chance on one-to-one interactive session. You can ask as many questions as possible from the experts. But before I go there, I need to tell you some very interesting facts about red lentils. So we started doing research, then I realized that red lentils is very good. It's like a natural Viagra. So it is very good for making babies, and the proof is the huge population of India and Sri Lanka. And as if that is not enough, it is also good for lactating mothers. So we all have grown up in some part on the lentils. And it is a very old crop and a very secular crop. It has its origin in the Middle East, in the Mesopotamia region. It has been mentioned about 8,000 or 9,000 years old. It has been found in Egyptian tombs. It has been found mention has been in the Bible, also Hindu holy scriptures. So it's a very old crop. It's not a new crop. And lentil is one of the probably few food items which have inspired Hindi, Urdu idioms or sayings. Those who understand Hindi, Urdu, there is a saying called "Ye muh aur masoor ki dal," which means this face and you want lentil soup. So this was the food of the king of the kings. This was the regal food. So we are very fortunate to have consumed in abundance these red lentils. So the global trade flows of red lentils are about 8% of the global trade. So it's not a very major crop like beans or peas, but it is a substantially important trade flow of about 8% in the global trade. This is the harvesting and sowing calendar. So barring the month of January, pretty much whole year is a year of activity because you have multiple origins and many destinations. The font is small, but let me, globally, this year, the supply and demand is more or less like last year. In these figures, these figures will be available later on the YouTube or also in your presentation. Other than Canada, which also includes the figure for green lentils, and also USA, pretty much it's a supply and demand situation of red lentils. Canadian this year, there's a matter of debate how much is the carry from the last year, but the official number and the private sources, the number is anywhere ranging from 750,000 to 100,000. Please agree to disagree with me. So that's what is going to make a robust debate. So the carry is from 750 to 1 million, and with this year's of 1.6 or 1.7, you have good 2.78 million tons available till the next year, at least from Canada. Australian numbers are very interesting. The difference between the officially available numbers and what private trade thinks or perceives, the difference could be to 250 to 300,000 tons. So more on that we will discuss with our experts. Indian red lentil official number is 1.2 million tons. how much is it the real or versus whatever is the data available from the government? That also we'll discuss. We have many experts here and also in the audience. These are Turkish prices for 10 years, probably historically lowest numbers in recent times. Similar fate from Australia, also from Canada. So now this is the general background. I will take you back to my original slide. So we are looking at about, in 2018-19 cycle, a sufficient abundant crop from Canada with the carryover of current year. With the carryover of current year from Australia and the new crop, about 650 to 700,000 tons from there. So now I will start with my most senior, most learned, my mentor, my guide, friend, philosopher, Mr. Saif. And I will start his slides so that he can give us some interesting insight from Egyptian market.
Good afternoon. Since I'm born in Sri Lanka and come from Egypt, I'll speak from an Egyptian perspective. Our figures that I've presented here are not any formal statistics. These are statistics we have formulated ourselves. Egypt has approximately a yearly consumption of anything from 90,000 to... Yeah. Good afternoon once again. I'll speak to you from an Egyptian perspective because we are processors in Egypt, and all the figures that I've shown there are figures that we have formulated as a company. They are not proven figures, but this is a fairly good estimate of where we stand as far as the Egyptian market and consumption of lentils are. We have an average consumption of between 90 to 120,000 tons of lentils per annum. If we were to break it up origin-wise, we import about 10 to 15% of that volume from Turkish origin, or maybe a little bit of Syrian, 20 to 25% Australian origin, and the bulk of the lentils comes from Canada. If you were to compare the processing facilities, and Egypt has become in the last few years, very capable of processing their own lentils. So we have seen the breakdown of processed to a sense split lentils in the percentage of about 10 to 15% of processed lentils comes from Canada, 20 to 25% comes from Syria as processed form, and the whole lentil market represents about 60 to 70%. The preference of the Egyptian consumer, like the Bangladeshi consumer, is for the smaller and the darker lentils that come from Turkey and also from Australia, the Nipper variety. If you were to take the last 5 years and compare the prices and the quantities, one would see... May I just have the next slide? The next slide.
Sorry for the interruption.
The last 5 years, we have seen a gradual variation depending on the price, the rate of exchange, and the international price of lentils. And you see the volumes, you can see from 2014 to 2018, even in spite of prices dropping, the consumption of lentils has fallen in Egypt. And this is a direct relationship to what happened about 16 months ago with the devaluation in Egypt. This was a result of an IMF deal that made Egypt rationalize its rate of exchange from a rate of exchange of almost 8 pounds to it went up to 18 pounds. And this has resulted in a significant drop of imports. And we see that as in the number that shows in the last 2018 figures, which is estimated to drop to 75,000. This number is also related because of we had a cross-border trade in Egypt that we had the Sudanese market because of political reasons. The Sudanese market and the borders closed down, so that this number also is affected and has dropped to the number that we estimate this year. We go to the next slide, and we want to display to you that there is a substitution also happening in the Egyptian market because of what's happened with the rate of exchange. And people are not depending so much on lentils when they find cheaper substitutes. And here a relation is given with potatoes. Potatoes is, if you compare the price of lentils and potatoes, you can see that from 2014 to 2018, the price of potatoes locally have dropped to almost $100 a ton. And there has been some substitution. If you read the chart, you can see the relationship between the numbers and in Egyptian pounds, and thereby the drop in consumption. The most important thing that, unlike the other Middle East markets, the consumption of lentils in Egypt is not related to Ramadan consumption because Egyptian consumption of lentils is mainly in the winter and related to the colder months of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Saif Dada. That was very informative. And also very interesting correlation between the potatoes and, by the way, potato and lentils also make a very nice curry together as well. Yeah. So then we'll switch the sequence a little bit. We'll go to then an origin, and then we'll come back to a key market. Quentin, tell us, how is this, especially the carry, the question of carry? There is a little bit disagreement about what is the carry, how much is the real. Give us some sense into that carry and this year's production, and how much is going to be availability of the red lentils in this season, and where all it can go.
Sure. Okay, so starting out on the production side for this past year, we believe the production figure was about 1.6 million tons in Canada. If you want to look at export statistics to figure out where that carryout figure should end up, exports from Canada at the end of March were down 900,000 tons year over year versus last year, with obviously India being the biggest factor there. Indian exports down over 470,000 tons. So the answer is, where does it go? Nowhere. I think it stays in some capacity. It will stay in Canada until the Indian marketplace does come back, and my belief is that it will come back in time. It's not in the next 1 month or 2 months, but in the next 8 to 16 months, I think you're going to see a more normalized program for exports to India. Not maybe the insatiable demand that we saw from a few years back, but a more normal program that would reflect 400 to 500,000 tons per year out of Canada. So looking at the crop year, we really only have 2 more months of exports to add to that, 2.5 months. I believe we will see a carryout of about between 700 and 750,000 tons. We have seen some growth in terms of pet food demand as well as the Mexican market that has added a little bit of a push, but nobody can make up for what demand we've seen for India the past few years. And I think with some of the growth in Kazakhstan acres as well as some of the volatility with currency and other political issues elsewhere, I do not see Turkey making up for an extra 300,000 or 400,000 tons to help us deplete our carryout in Canada.
And what is your estimation for the 2018 and 19 cycle in terms of production?
Yeah, so Statistics Canada released their report on April 27th. I think a lot of traders in Canada, not just pulse traders, but oilseeds and cereal traders would say there were major flaws in this report. As an example, many in the trade believe the canola number is wrong to the tune of 3 million acres. That's a pretty massive variance. So I think acres in Canada will be down between 17 and 20%. That is not enough to fundamentally change the story. So whether you want to say acres are down 10 or 15 or 20%, it does not matter. We do have a surplus in Canada. I think the more important story, it revolves around Grower returns at these prices today, growers are making zero margin whatsoever. So the interest for them to flood the market with supply is going to be significantly less than if values are, $50 or $100 a ton higher to help move that out of Canada. The second part of the story also is that if you were at the green lentil panel yesterday, Mr. Simpson discussed the fact that we have very low subsoil moisture in Canada. Seeding is delayed between 3 and 4 weeks in a lot of areas. So a lot of the growers in Canada will wait until the fall to market their product because they do not want to take on the production risk at these levels. So on that basis, I think you're looking at roughly a production number next year of between 1.3 and 1.4 million tons. So combine that with the carryout figure, you're looking at a little over 2 million tons of marketable red lentils from Canada this next year.
So from now till the next year's, this 17, 18, 19 cycle, about 2.1, 2.2 is the number. More on the pricing outlook and other things, we'll go on that topic a bit later. But then coming back again to a very key market, sitting on my right is Mr. Rajendran from Yarm Export. He will tell us why are so much lentils being consumed in Sri Lanka. This is like 80% of the market. Lentils.
Actually, in Sri Lanka, we all use it for morning breakfast and lunch and dinner. It's like a stable food. There is no any substitute for lentils in Sri Lanka. Lentils means they want. So we have to be.
And I must say, Sri Lankans are very clever people because they don't know which lentils to eat.
Yeah, sure.
So please give us some numbers, like how much is being imported, what is your outlook for this year?
And I think Sri Lanka is already, every year we need about 12,000 metric tons of whole lentils, and it's about 140,000 to 136 to 140,000 metric tons of lentils we need. And I think mainly we are importing from Australia and Canada. So it's like continuously, I think for last 3-4 years, there is no any big difference between the imports. So.
And have you seen this production, this importation increasing or?
It's stable. It's like consistently it's about the same amount. But sometimes because of the duty structure, it was going on when the market was very high I think in 2015, you can see the market at that time some split lentils came in a big wave from India and from other countries. And apart from this, I think it's like we need about 12,000 tons every month.
I would reckon that Sri Lanka, given the population and the importation of red lentils, probably per capita consumption is one of the highest in the world.
Yes, highest.
As a single individual pulse, but more on that a bit later. Let me go back to, again, a key export market and a very quality market of Australia. To my friend Sanjeev, who's technically and experientially very well qualified to speak on that topic.
Thank you, Sudhakar. Hello, everyone. Well, Australia has had 2 large crops. The year before last was fairly large, very close to 1 million tons, and all of it got exported out. There was hardly anything that was left behind. But I think what's made the difference in the past 12 months or so is the production last year, which is anywhere between 600,000 to 700,000 tons. There is a view that it could be less than 600,000 tons, but by and large suggests that 600,000 to 700,000 tons. But and also like Quinton referred to in terms of the carry stock, so Australia also faces that similar kind of an issue. Where we think that getting into the next year, it could be as much as 200,000 tons left over. So just to put it in perspective, 200,000 tons a few years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, used to be the total crop of Australia. So carrying forward a total crop means a lot. And this is also just presuming that there'll be a consistent kind of a minimal export of about 30,000 tons in a month from now until October and November. So I think the key points that resonate from the origin of Australia is the oversupply, and of course the planting intentions, which would remain It's fairly consistent, but 20% down from last year. That's what we think. Its time is running out. Probably it's starting to get fairly chilly and cold in lentil producing areas. So the planting time is running out in another 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe 4. But that's what the expectation is.
And in terms of production, so we are looking at somewhere anywhere, depending whose number you decide, from 350 to 450,000 tons. Is that
In the coming year?
in the coming year?
Yes.
And 200,000 tons of carry, so about 650 to 600,000 tons of availability from now till December.
Could be.
So add that to Canada, the Canadian number, so that gives some sense in terms of production availability of red lentils in the market. One question before we go that, and that's a very important thing. We're not blaming, but we say the quality of data is not reliable. We don't get enough good numbers either from India or from Africa or from Asia. But imagine the difference in a key structured country like Australia. There's a difference, the variation of 300,000 tons of production number. So these days it's getting increasingly difficult to pin down the right number.
I don't think that there's the official figures that we talk about is an outdated figure. So they haven't yet updated revised yet. And what actually has happened is that South Australia forecast has been fairly close to what the total production was, but in Victoria the yields was kind of underestimated. Like I was seeing the figures of they were talking about just over a ton per hectare, whereas in reality it is almost about 2 tons per hectare, and so that explains the difference. So there is an explanation towards that.
Okay. So it's maybe a matter of time by the time they get it right. So now we go back to a very key market which is producing as well as sometimes importing market, Merve. Merve is the 3rd generation trader and processor from Goze Tarim, and also from my second home, Turkey, and one of the birthplace and influential region for red lentils. So please tell us how much is going to be the production this year, any hope of importation, and any key trends which you see in your market.
Thank you, Sud. Hello, everyone. Well, let me start with the shocking news. We have carryover also. What we are thinking is that we have currently 100,000 tons of red lentils in inventories. And if we come to why, the traders and the stockists, they bought red lentils at high prices with an expectation of inclining market. However, it didn't come out that way, so this created the current situation. About the new crop, so the new crop is about to start in 10 days, and we're expecting it to end around mid-June. And there was no bad news about the weather. The rainfalls came at the right time. The sun came out at the right time, especially in the flowering period. So we are expecting the field yield is going to be good. It's, I can say, for 1 kilo seed comes out as 7 kilo whole red lentils. So with this yield, we're expecting around 350,000 tons of production. And this is with a 20% to 30% decrease in planting area. So with the good yield, it's balancing the decrease in the planting area. That's what I can say. So we are expecting to start new season with 400,000 tons with the carryover. That's what I can say about the production for this year.
And what about import prospects this year?
So what we have imported is around 300,000 tons. This is what we import usually, and this is what we expect actually next year too, if the prices will match, let's say. But this year what was different is, so we imported from Canada, Australia, and Kazakhstan. This year only 1 of the third came from Australia and Canada, and the 2 of the third came from Kazakhstan. And this is not only because this is not because the yield, this is because of the price, because also we have devaluation of Turkish lira against US dollars, and this is affecting our imports.
Of course, so the take-home message is about 300,000 tons of imports, provided prices remain reasonably okay to be imported. Mr. Saif pinned it down to about 75,000 tons this year, 130 to 140,000 tons from Canada, from Sri Lanka. So these are the numbers from the key markets. We will not avoid one question of pricing. So we will go back to all of us, because it's a very balanced panel. We have two importing countries, processors. We have one processor and importer and trader. And we also have two origin countries. So it's a very balanced. So we will go back in the pricing outlook, pin down the number in terms of per metric ton, what we can expect, with and without the big elephant in the market, if India remains in the market or if it doesn't remain in the market. So we'll look at both the scenarios. So, and then of course we have plenty of time to question answers. Please start thinking, Slido, or whichever way you want to ask. We all are here to discuss. We would like to make it as interactive as possible, not only related to pricing, outlook, production, or other aspects of quality, exportation, trade barriers, everything we can talk about it. Quentin, what do you think will be in two scenarios, the price? If India comes back in the market, like what they did last year, in terms of pricing, give us because sometimes a FOB number for red lentil, say number 2. What can happen in next 6 months' time with or without India scenarios?
Okay, you want a FOB number or you want a CNF number?
CNF is better?
CNF is better. Okay, so on the CNF side, I think without India, obviously currency is going to be a major factor. I think that's what everybody at this conference is talking about, whether you're from Turkey or Canada or Australia. That'll be a major influence on pricing. If you look at charts right now for the Canadian dollar, we're in the lower part of the range, so you could say there's some risk of 3 to 4% increase that way. Of course, Mr. Trump will likely have some influence on those things.
You have to be watchful at 3 a.m. tweets, huh?
Yeah, I have him on Twitter, so we'll watch that closely. But without India, I think you're talking about between 400 and 450. I think you've already seen bulk vessel rates increase by about 20%. We have not seen that happen yet on the container front, but I think that's a risk that people have to be aware of, that container freight rates could increase into the fall and particularly into 2019. Grower values without India will likely be fairly flat, so that's why I would say 400 to 450 is realistic. If you have India coming into the tune of say 500,000 tons globally, I think within the next 8 to 12 months, I think you're going to see a price migrating towards $500 to $525.
So similar prices, Rajendra, are for Colombo as well, because the freight is in containers. I would be similar. Yes. Would these prices make you happy because you're in buyer's market? Don't say you want it for free.
No, actually, yeah, sure. Actually, now, mostly I think this price is very comfortable for Sri Lankan market, because today only the government has announced the duty structure. They have put the duty for whole lentils and split lentils. I think 7 rupees, earlier it was 1 rupee and 3 rupees, and today is 7 rupees and 12 rupees. Because earlier there's a gap only 2 rupees between the split lentils and the whole lentils. So from today it's 5 rupees. I think more whole lentils will come into Colombo rather than the split lentils. And this is a quite cheaper price, I think, after a very long time. And it's a very comfortable price for...
This is a very nice news to exporters like us. Please know, somebody is saying this is a good price. I don't want prices to go down more. Very nice. Sanjeev, where will you put down the number from Australia?
I think the general consensus is...
Without in India scenario. Yeah.
Yes, the general consensus is of oversupply, and we're talking about carry stocks and all. So I think it's the whole market is going to be driven to that unless something drastic happens. So we do feel that yes, there is a resistance towards, well, there is always grower resistance on selling at lower prices, but I think 400, 450 is probably where the market should be on a CNF basis. So with so much of stocks and the production still to come up of 2018, we probably just have no other outlook to try and see in case if there's going to be any firmer price. But probably 450 or so.
Merve, what is your expectation from a key importing as well as re-export market, Turkey? Are these prices, you see a lot of business happening, or you think that the possibility of doing importing at these levels is big? From the two key origins, you have the number.
Well, so this is really hard to say. What we are aiming is 400 levels keep like this currently. We all like to see an inclining market, of course, to gain money. But with the current situation in Turkey, we are expecting the elections also. So it's really hard to predict. So that's why I can't say a price right now.
Saif Dada, what is your take? What will make you happy?
Obviously, a rise in prices makes us all happy because it gives the whole supply chain an opportunity to make money. But one thing that's strikingly, surprisingly, one would have thought that with the lower prices, consumption would increase. We have not seen that happening in Egypt. So this is the big surprise for us. I mean, these prices are record low prices. We hope that it may be a slow start, but it may trigger better consumption patterns we as a company and are promoting different usages of lentils, and I hope that with these prices, because we are very record low prices also in compared to what we have been importing in the past, and maybe this could trigger some long-term demand and higher consumption.
It's a very important message he's giving here. He's saying we need to increase the consumption and also find alternative usages. The diversification of the demand is a key criteria, not only for red lentils, but for all the pulses. And as your confederation has done an amazing job in finding new markets, avenues, destinations for all pulses, red lentils included, but more needs to be done. And that per capita consumption needs to be increased as much as possible. Right now, we are less than 3 grams per person per day globally. That needs to go up. So now we have lots of time. Please, if we can have questions, I'll be looking at my phone. If we have questions, we can put them on the screen. So the first question which has come is very interesting, and it says, if I understand it correctly, it says, would you explain me how many percentage of red lentils you get from Russia, Turkish, Canada, Kazakhstan, and EU, probably Australia? Very good. So I think the best person to answer this, we have 3 very good panelists. Saif Dada, would you like to take this? The recovery percentages from these different lentils from Turkey, Russia, Canada, and CIS countries?
For us,
give us in the serial, like number 1 to...
as a preference, as a miller, we find that the best value comes from splitting from the Australian lentils, and we are, as a splitter, find that we have more consistency with Australian lentils. The Canadian lentils have been questionable with the weather and years when we have had quality issues with the crop. We find that we as a miller really don't know how to calculate our yield when we are buying lentils, because the grading is so common and so inconsistent that one cannot really value Canadian lentils when they're...
Local stocks, expected local production, and current and expected prices. So it's like 10 questions into one. I think I'm the only one here who's because there's nobody from India. So first of all, this is very, very dangerous to be calling ourselves or anyone expert. But, so before, yes, of course, it's very obvious. They want to, given the election year, next year, the farmers, the idea is to remunerate the farmer as much as possible, because one thing which we have to be cognizant, we have to remember, is that 70% of Indians live in villages. They are directly or indirectly dependent on agriculture. So for any government, it is very important to give them enough remuneration. And to do that, the approach, the intent is genuine, but approach sometimes becomes very convoluted, especially for when we talk about things on international market. So they will try to do everything possible to make the prices of pulses in the local market up. And for that, all kind of government intervention will be used till the time prices reach the desired level, which is close to minimum support price, which government has promised that farmers should get 50% over the cost of production. Turkish currency going crazy. Do you think Turkey imports again with this currency? Because today Turkish price in Canadian in the same in US dollar. Merve, do you want to take this? Do you think with the current currency prices, the exchange rate, if it goes down more, will that reduce the imports in Turkey, or do you think that basic demand, because it is also dependent on re-export, will that remain in the market?
Before answering your question, I should add this. Turkey doesn't import because of its local market. What Turkey imports, it re-exports like 80% of it, because Turkish people eat mostly Turkish red lentils. Because of the quality, they prefer Turkish red lentils. But what we import, with the inward processing regime, we are re-exporting it. So this is why the price is the most important thing when we are importing. But if the demand is more, and if the Turkey sees this as a position, then the import quantity can increase. Correct.
There is a very interesting question here. It's there on the screen, so I have to say it. To Glencore, how many countries you have problems about chemicals and GM? I think this is not the right forum to have this kind of question, because my colleague on the right is representing Red Lentils panel. So I think if we limit ourselves to specifics to that, rather than discussing something which is not relevant, but I would like to take this question. Do you think 2005 levels coming back again of $300 metric tons? India is the big elephant in the room, but no one on our panel. Yes, I acknowledge that mistake. We had invited some key people. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here, so that's why we are taking the brunt of all those questions. We'll be happy to do that. And also, a very interesting question, what is the cost to farmers to grow lentils in Canada? I think this question was already answered in the Green Lentils panel, that the current prices are pretty much standard average cost of growing in Canada. And how long farmers can hold the crop if they don't get the right price? So maybe Quentin can take this question. How long can they hold the crop if they don't get the right price, or the price below the cost of production?
You want me to answer all those questions or just the one? I'll go with the last one. Farmers in Canada can store an entire year's crop. So in terms of storage itself, they can do everything. That's not an issue. What we've also seen is that their canola stocks will be depleted at the end of this year. Their carryout will be fairly tight. Barley stocks, because of the strong feed demand in China, will be very, very low as well as malt barley too. And even our pea carryout stocks that what once appeared to be burdensome will be far less than we thought. So growers can store it physically. From a cash flow perspective, they are very comfortable as well. And when you look at red lentils, how they store, in particular this year with low moisture being between 11 and 12%, the risk to the grower is also lower. So it's not that there will be zero sales at today's levels that are barely break even, in some cases losing. They will want to get a bin back for fertilizer, or they may want to move a little bit just to keep things flowing, but they can easily store this crop. We saw this back a little over 5 or 6 years ago, where we had sequential years of over 500,000 tons of carryout, and I think the Australian grower likely you'd say a similar thing. So If they don't like the price, they will wait. If you look at this year's carryout, we're not 10 or 20 or $30 away from price ideas for half the growers. We're like $100 a ton away from their ideas. So they will be willing to store the crop even if the values go up $50 a ton.
Yeah, we are talking about influential farmers. They have holding power. They can and last few years have been very good for them. So they have enough appetite to hold the cargo as well. A very specific question. How much quantity has been exported from Australia so far has been asked by a friend and colleague. Sanjeev, how much, what do you reckon would be?
Yeah, well, these are official statistics, and 260,000 tons exported out till date. Till end of March, actually.
There is a question, Marve, do you expect Kazakhstan to continue to increase production at current low levels? Because you have experience of, you know, the prices are low, but do you think they will increase more at these prices, or because the prices are so low, they will limit the production?
Like you're asking me the prices, about the prices?
The question is, do you expect Kazakhstan to continue increase production in Kazakhstan because the prices are low? Because when the prices are low, farmers tend not to, you know, plant and.
Yes, actually, if Kazakhstan increases its production and Canada and Australia lentil levels are too high comparing to Kazakh, then Turkish people can keep importing Kazakh lentils. So I can't say for sure, but it will be okay to increase their production also. But right now we have oversupply, so I'm not sure if this is a good idea for this year.
Yeah, there is always a correlation between the prices which a producer gets versus the production he does. Unfortunately, what happens, they do it in the same linear year, which is the problem all over the world, but unfortunately that is the reality. A very interesting question has come for Saif Dada. I'm having a problem in reading that because by the time I go down, it just pulls me. The questions are coming at a very fast pace. I think this is a very interactive session. There are like hundreds of questions. He says, would you be willing to pay the price, a premium to good quality Turkish and other lentils if it has right and good Egyptian-friendly flavors, you know?
We definitely pay a premium for Turkish lentils, and we have paid up to $200 as a premium for the preferred Turkish lentils. The Egyptian consumer very clearly understands the flavor of Turkish lentils, like the Turkish consumer. And with that difference narrowing, the spread narrowing, we are going to be, in my opinion, seeing more of Turkish lentils being consumed in Egypt. The reason for the preference, like the Turkish consumer, the Egyptian consumer definitely prefers the small, darker red lentils with flavor. And that comes from the Turkish lentils, which we don't see very much in the Canadian lentils.
That's good to know that if the right flavor profile and the characteristics which a destination market needs, if it's available, then we can get some premium. So all the quality processors, please take note of that. There's a very nice question and valid question. With an Indian production estimate of 1.2 million tons, which comfortably covers the demand for the year, why would there be a requirement for any imports at all? You want to take that?
Sure. Number one, I don't think the production is 1.2 million tons. I think there's probably a lot of people in this room that have questioned those numbers, which, when you look at receivables into the domestic market, they do not equal those types of levels. And a lot of years that they barely reach those levels even with the imports. So I think, although that's roughly the consumption per year, I think that is not what the production will be. You talk about dryness in Australia, you talk about dryness in Canada. There's been obviously some deficiencies in rainfall in India as well, with reservoir levels relatively low. So I think To say that India will produce 1.2 million tons of red lentils this coming year, I would bet against that personally.
So it depends. If you rely on that number, then of course that answers the question. I think we have pretty much answered all the questions. Let me just go through one more time. I don't want to leave anything. Any other questions from the list you guys want to address? Because we have a couple of minutes. Or I think we have addressed quality. Any concluding remarks? I think we can start with Saifullah. Any concluding remarks, considering in a nutshell, 2.1, 2.2 million from Canada, 650,000 tons from Australia, 75,000 tons import, 300,000 tons from Turkey, 130,000 tons from Sri Lanka, our host country and the most beautiful country. I like the spicy lentil curry and appam and sometimes. And also India, potentially from India about 550 to 600,000 tons. If we can have some concluding remarks from Mr.
Well, with these low prices, I hope we can trigger demand, and we are going to look at all ways to try and push towards triggering more and more demand. That's all I can say.
Merve, any nice thoughts which can make the market, red lentils, more vibrant? Any remarks?
I think everything is pretty much said.
Well, I think the keynote has been of oversupply and a certain amount of production and all. So, and prices are low. Let's just hope that consumption picks up. Like Saif said, that consumption, we really don't understand the reason why consumption is not picking up at these low prices. But that's probably the hope.
Quinton?
The one thing I would just say is that I think this past year has demonstrated to a lot of people the importance of diversification in these markets, and I think I would echo your comment from before in terms of whether it's GPC or people like Pulse Canada or Pulse Australia, going out and actively promoting these products. We're seeing some traction in that in terms of ingredients business, fractionation type business, pet food as well in North America, and I think although we are talking about oversupply right now, to me, this industry does need to continue to grow. I think Kazakhstan does need to continue to have growth long term as well. And although we talk about it as a threat and an issue maybe for Australians or Canadians right now, I completely believe that 10 years from now, we'll need triple the acreage there. I think the acreage in Canada and Australia is sustainable. It's just that we're a little bit ahead of the curve right now without any major weather problems, but 5 and 10 years from now, we will be talking about this as a sustainable production level and sales level.
Your host?
Yeah, if India is not buying, really it will affect the entire world. Because if they stop buying and if they are not interested, and if they have a good crop, and it will affect actually the whole, even though if you are keeping the stocks, so how long we can keep it. So if it is true, if the 1.2 million tons is I don't know, Mr. Quinton says it won't be a correct figure, but if it is a exact figure, maybe about, we can say about 30-40% plus or minus, but even if it is about 800,000 tons.
That gives you 500,000 tons.
So that's enough for, I think, Indian requirement.
But one thing we all can do, I don't know how many of those in today's lunch tried the delicious lentil curry. This is made from red lentils, although it looks yellow, but it's red lentils. I had 3 helpings. If we at least even during the course of conference have 2-3 helpings, that will definitely help us for sure. Thank you very much. It's an amazing panelist. It's very rare that we get so many intelligent people together, other than me.
Wonderful panel once again. We will take a memento photograph as the official photographer. Thank you once again, panel. Wonderful. Thank you, Sudhakar. Wonderful as usual. This session was sponsored by Armada Foods, Got to remind you, we'll move on very quickly to the next session on pea. So, please be in your seats. We're about to start with that. As already told you, the tea and coffee is running continuously. Feel free to step up anytime. Come back to the hall for the sessions. Just 2 more sessions before we wind up with the gala closing reception. So this is the Global Pea Outlook, yellow, dun, and green peas. On the panel, I'd like to invite Farhan Adam, Marina Commodities of Canada. Please also welcome Hannah Castle from AGT Foods Australia. Thank you, sir. Up next, Will Watchorn of Glencore. Muhammad Ahmed of Awam Group, Pakistan. And Rakesh Khemka of Uma Exports from India. This Global Peas Outlook, yellow, dun, and green peas, is sponsored by Marina Commodities. So there's a change in the backdrop. Mr. Vijay Iyengar is not on the panel, but we have Will Watchorn of Glencore. With that, I'll hand it over to the panel. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Farhan Adam from Marina Commodities in Canada. I'm honored to be your moderator for the 2018 Global Pea Outlook session. I would like to thank GPC for this wonderful opportunity and the many sponsors for this event. I promise to do my best to keep you all entertained for the next 50 minutes. Our format this afternoon will consist of presentations from our distinguished panel. We'll focus on the supply side first and then move on to the demand side. After the presentations, I will ask the panel a few hot questions to warm them up for the Q&A session from the audience. Does that sound good? Let's get started. I'm humbled to be in the presence of such an esteemed panel of experts today who will be sharing their immense knowledge and passion for our industry. Please join me in welcoming Will from Glencore, who will enlighten us with Black Sea and Baltic origin peas. I will personally like to thank him because he just joined us on a very short notice, which is an hour back. Mr. Ahmed from Awam Group, who will share us with an update from Pakistan. Ms. Hannah from AGT, Australia, who will enlighten us with Australian peas. And of course, Mr. Rakesh from Uma Exports, who will fill us in with what is happening in India. And I, of course, will do my best in providing updates from Canada and USA. It has certainly been a rocky year for the pea market in India. A devastating 50% duty on yellow peas was imposed during the end of the year, and now these quantitative restrictions. Have they really impacted the pea trade? I'm sure we will be hearing more about that today, along with Mr. Trump policies, which will certainly add some unique flavor to the pea trade in China. Peas and politics, 2 peas in a pod. Just to give a brief update, the world pea production of 2018-19 is set to decrease by 10%. But due to the carryover stocks, we realize only a 5% decline. Without further ado, let's now hear from the experts on how well we did this year and what the forecasts are for the 2018-19. Let's start off with Ms. Hannah from Australia.
Thanks, Farhan. As the 7th largest producer of peas globally, I'm thrilled that Australia gets to go first in talking about peas today. Please bear with me as we don't have millions of tonnes like some of the other origins to talk about. Field peas are Australia's 5th largest pulse crop by total area and total production, with about 200,000 hectares grown each year. They are predominantly grown in southern Australia and have been relatively stable in total area planted for over the past 5 to 6 years, with prices delivering suitable gross margins for farmers. Green peas and white peas don't get much of a mention as they only make up a small portion of the Australian crop, with Casper or Dun type dominating production. Seeding occurs in May with harvest in October-November, and Casper yields are very susceptible to frost events. The 16-17 marketing year saw our biggest pea export since 2010, with 400,000 tonnes of production versus the usual 200 to 300,000. However, with the recent tariffs and now bans into India, we expect to finish up this year with much lower export numbers. The effect of this hasn't been as great on total stocks remaining, as we have seen lower production again this year at 275,000 tonnes on the back of declining prices and lower yields. We've also been lucky to see China come into the market, which is offsetting some of the lost Indian demand. Traditionally, India has taken 50% of our total pea export program, but for this current marketing year, they have only taken about 35%, and total volume is only at around 30,000 tonnes until March versus 65,000 for the same period last year. Comparatively, China has taken 14,000 tonne versus less than 1,000 the previous season for the same period. Our difficulty now is, even though China represents a new demand opportunity, our local price has kicked up as it has represented the cheapest pulse protein source in Australia, providing huge potential for the Australian feed market, which takes 10 to 11 million tonnes of feed grain each year, and also into the local farmers who also grow these and will feed them out. In the last 4 or 5 years, FOB values of peas have been quite strong, but they've reached their lowest price since 2011 in the current season. Australia has just started to see the use domestically of peas for pet food manufacturing, which we hope will grow along with the human consumption domestic market, both of which remain quite small at the moment. In terms of an outlook for Australia for 2018, I feel it's less acres planted. It's hard to say as seeding has only just begun, maybe 5 or 10%, but with lower prices persisting and the timing of the tariffs and now ban in India, our expectation is that more area will go to other pulses such as Kabuli chickpeas, which grow in similar soil conditions. Even with the recent rally in local prices, it's still not as favourable compared to some other crops, including some of the cereal crops of choice. There's also been some throwback issues of older varieties this year, with the traditional Dun type appearance coming through some of the seeds, which has led to some cross-contamination just at a farmer level. This is meaning that farmers need to purchase fresh seed in most cases rather than utilise some of their own stock on farm. I guess it all depends on weather conditions, which everyone's already alluded to is quite dry in Australia at the moment, but we expect total production or area to be down maybe 15% this year.
All right. Thank you, Anna. There were some stats on these slides over there, but I don't think anybody can read that. Well, these slides will be available later on, and I'm sure those presentations will come by. As we all know, Black Sea and Baltic origin has become a very important supplier for peas. Will now provide us with a short update on these supply estimates and the current situation in that area.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'll start in the Black Sea with Russia. We've come off a recent record crop. The government figures out of Russia are 3.2 million tonnes of peas for the year, which is quite a bit above what StatPub have been showing. The crop has spread further, but also the domestic consumption has increased in Russia. We are seeing more use for animal feed because of the EU ban on, the Russian ban on the import of EU meat products. The Russian meat market has exploded, which has increased demand for home-fed proteins. In Russia, we expect the crop to be down, give or take, 20% of area. But the main point to remember is last year's yield was absolute records. And today, the crop is very, very dry. It's hot. The temperatures have been 10 to 12 degrees over the average. It was seeded late. It needs a drink. In Ukraine, after initially thinking we were going to see the area down 20% because the prices are poor, again, late seeded, the farmers have actually put the peas in. So we think actually the area should be around unchanged. Again, it's been hot and dry. but they're forecasting some rain over the next 2 weeks. It's difficult to get an idea whether it's going to be enough. The other two Black Sea countries to remember are the two smaller ones, Romania and Bulgaria, predominantly harvest sellers, new entrants into the market. We think the crop in that area will be down 10 to 15%, but because it's quite a small crop in a big area, it's difficult to really get a firm handle on what will be there. Moving up into Europe, France used to be a big player. Crop area very similar year on year. Very robust domestic demand for feed, increased starch demand. We've seen opening of new lines for starch production in France, which is really removing the French from being an exporter of volume. In the Baltics, yes, bigger producer, but the prices are very poor up there. They're struggling. We think the area will be down 25%. The area on the beans has moved predominantly to the faba beans, which has replaced them, because the farmer likes to have a pulse in the ration because of the nitrogen-fixing production. Pretty much on the...
So, what's your expected production numbers over there? And let's combine like Russia and Ukraine. What's your...
if we look at the two together, we would think there's going to be production of around 3 million tons.
Russia and Ukraine
Russia and
combined?
Ukraine put together, you've probably got around 30 to 40,000 tons in the other two, Romania, Bulgaria. French production, we think, will be around 600,000 tons. The thing to remember in the Baltics is there's a very heavy carry-out, and also there's a heavy carry-out in Russia as well. If you take the government figures in Russia, potentially there's 600,000 tons of peas, but they're up in Siberia. If the price doesn't move up, they're not going to come for export, they're going to be fed. The Baltics has probably got around 200,000 tons of carry-out. But again, where prices are today, you've got to remember soy meal is $500 in Spain, and it's 46 Pro. Peas are 23, and it's 250, so it's a straightforward calculation. These products are going to move to feed.
It can, for sure, for sure. I'll hear more about you. I'll now talk about North America, who is still the largest producer of peas in the world. Even though we are faced with such large tariff and restrictions, we found a way to keep our growers busy in shipping. Let's find out how. Let's start off with USA peas, as their production are relatively small to affect the world trade. In 2017, the total estimated production of peas was around 176,000 of yellows and 150,000 tons of green peas. In 2018, according to startup sources, they expect the production will decrease significantly to 125,000 tons of yellow peas and only 90,000 tons of green peas. USA has a very strong demand for food aid tender, in which many of these peas are consumed. And for their exports, India and China have been their predominant markets. The USA green peas are very well regarded for their premium quality and are sold at huge premiums. So the green peas would have more effect than the yellow peas in the world market. That completes the USA update now. Let's get into the Canadian peas. According to Saskatchewan's Agriculture's first crop report of the season, seeding of this year's crop has just started, with only 1% of all the intended crops now planted. A very cool and late spring has delayed field work across the province. Let's start off with the green peas S&D in Canada. I can't make that work, so anyways. As you can see, we have included data from StatPub. However, we have a slight difference of opinion in our estimates, which I would like to discuss. In 2017, the production estimates were approximately 450,000 tons, with carryover of 120,000 tons, giving approximately less than 600,000 tons of green peas to market to the world. This year, the quality has been decent in Canada and has been very easy to market. We expect about 350,000 tons in exports and 150,000 tons of the domestic feed, wastage, and seed use, resulting in an ending inventory of 100,000 tons. So as you can see that India has been always the predominant market for green peas. In 2018, we expect a 15% increase in acreage and expect a 530,000 tons of green pea production, whereas the StatPub estimates are higher and they expect 580,000 tons of production. Carry-in would be about 100,000 tons or so, and we would have about anywhere from 630 to 700,000 tons to market. We expect a strong export of 450,000 to the world, and especially with a decline in production in USA, Canada will definitely take a lead. Seed, feed, and wastage, which again would be 130,000 tons, with a small carryover of only 50 to 100,000 tons in 2019. Normally, the biggest market for green peas has always been India, followed by China. Philippines and Colombia are also a continuous buyer of Canadian green peas. But with the recent ambiguity of quantitative restrictions of import peas in India, green peas are silent, and their fate is unknown. We'll discuss that later when Rakesh will have a chance. Now let's move on to yellow peas in Canada. In 2017, the production estimates are approximately 3.6 to 3.7 million tons, with a carryover of 200,000 tons, giving anywhere from 3.8 to 3.9 million tons to market to the world. The domestic feed, wastage, and seed use was about 900,000 tons. Although our biggest buyer, India, was on the sidelines, we still expect to export about 2 to 2.2 million tons. We have already seen China becoming the major buyer for our peas. Canada has already exported more than 900,000 tons until the end of March, and we are forecasting this number to be anywhere from 1.5 to 1.6 million tons, leaving us with a carryover of 8 to 900,000. In 2018, we expect a 10% reduction in acres and also expect a 3.3 million ton production with 8 to 900,000 tons of carryover will give us 4.2 million tons to market. We still expect to export about 2 to 2.4 million tons, with the largest buyer again being China. Ending inventory of 8 to 900,000 will be available, and depending on India's government's policy, that could be a game changer. And of course, there are rumors from Mr. Trump's soybean duties, which will certainly leave China consuming a lot more peas for feed. At the moment, the growers do not like these current prices in Canada, but they continue to support at $7 a bushel. They have hardly hedged any of the new crop product. We feel less than 5% has been sold so far. With a strong duty and restriction on peas, the growers never panicked. Our growers are very strong. They remain very strong holders, and these prices, they are in no rush to sell. And they feel that India might come in again and will quickly creep up the prices. At these numbers, they can sell to the feed market any day. So they are in no hurry to sell. India has been the key to the pea trade. And I'm sure we are all anxious to hear about what is happening in India. But before India, let's talk with Ahmed about what Pakistan is up to.
Thank you, Farhan. Hello, everyone. Pakistan market is not as big, definitely, if we compare to India. But after, I think, India and China, Pakistan do buy a lot of yellow peas. In 2016, Pakistan bought 234,000 tons of yellow peas. 2017 was pretty much the same, 225,000. And up till now, Pakistan has bought 65 to 70,000 tons. So it's roughly around 17,000 tons a month. Current maximum consumption in Pakistan is in the month of Ramadan. So 1 month before that, we have a consumption which is almost double than the normal months. Right now in Pakistan, stock levels for yellow peas are very low. The only stock is what cargo is coming at the port. few vessels have delayed, and because of that, prices have really gone crazy. Today, if you have stock in Pakistan, realization is about $340. And if you talk about delivery after 15, 20 days, realization is around $280 or $290. So which tells you that how much short currently yellow peas is in Pakistan. The Pakistan population is 200 million people. So if you see the demand compared to 200 million people, it's not as much. The reason is that Pakistani population is not vegetarian. And there are few people who eat pulses, and mainly people who can't afford, who likes cheap food, goes for pulses. Yellow peas is one of the cheapest product. You have seen that prices of yellow peas falling from highs of 400 to 250, but we haven't seen any change in demand in yellow peas. That's shocking to us also. But if you see the prices of other pulses, they have also fallen down same way. Like desi chickpeas, which went up to 800 or maybe a little more, has come down to 550. So overall, yellow peas consumption has been pretty much same. Thank you.
Thank you. Rakesh, everybody wants to know what's happening in India with all these tariffs and now these quantitative restrictions. Let's first talk about how much you think India imported so far.
I think India imported so far around, estimates are around 1.5 million tons this year, from you can say July till April or maybe March, you can say.
Yeah, I agree, because Canada, hardly 200,000 tons is exported.
Basically, major of our imports have come from Ukraine, Russia, Romania, and other Red Sea, Black Sea countries.
And what is your consumption per month in India?
See, seeing the price levels of chickpeas, since the chickpeas has gone down, right now monthly consumption is around 150,000 tons, you can say. So the consumption has come down, and it may, again, if the prices keep on rising, it will come down again, because people will start consuming chickpeas and other pulses which are available in India. And currently, government is discouraging import of yellow peas, as they believe that it is replacing chickpeas and tur dal, and government wants to maintain MSP, so that the farmers can get good price and farmers can earn in India.
But these restrictions, do you think this will continue? And there is another rumor, I don't know how far that's true, that although India has restricted 100,000 tons of import, people have licenses to import 400,000 to 500,000 tons.
See, well, I think these restrictions are going to continue till the prices come in a very balanced way, so that the farmers, government gets satisfied that yes, farmers are getting good return for their crop. And number two, the rumors which they are saying that they have got around 400,000 tons or 500,000 tons of license, I don't think so, because today being the last date of submission with the government for the payment made already, advance payment made already, or the LC done. So I don't think so government has announced what is the quota, or they have given any licenses as yet. They are rumors only.
But what's your opinion?
I don't think so, because in the notification only they mentioned that they won't give anything beyond 100,000 tons. And I don't know what government will think and decide, but I don't think they will give anything beyond 100,000 tons.
So to understand that quantitative restriction, this 100,000 tons applies from anywhere from the BL date of April 24th and onwards?
Yes.
And that continues only for the next 2 months?
Yeah, government is just, this is, they've announced, but I think they will extend the period. They will extend the period, and they may extend the period for another 3 months, 6 months, anything.
I see, because it is the reason behind all this is to increase desi chickpea prices.
Desi chickpea price, tur, government don't want yellow pea to come into India, means whatever item which replaces chickpea and tur dal, they don't want that to come into India. They want to encourage consumption of chickpea, tur dal, and domestic pulses more.
So does this restriction apply to green peas or not? Because
see, yes, right now under the HS code it applies, but we have applied with the government that since the green peas consumption is totally different from yellow pea, it cannot be used as a replacement for chickpea or tur dal. So it will take time, but yes, I hope the government will release this.
Okay. So far the green peas is still in the area?
So far it is still restricted.
Okay. Hannah, with again dun peas being mainly going into India, what's the second plan for Australia?
Yeah, so typically most of the dun peas are going into Tutti Korean, and obviously we've seen a reduction in volume overall this season. I think we'll just see planting down for new crop, obviously, but with the existing stock that's remaining, some will go into stock feed, and we're hoping to push more into China that's really emerging as a volume opportunity for us.
So the China, are they taking this for feed or are they taking it for human consumption?
I believe it's going for feed.
And what is the value today into China?
Some recent levels that traded were around the 320 mark, CFR into China. So it's probably a tad higher today, but our currency is dropping a little bit at the moment. So there's probably some opportunities.
So in the new crop, growers still plan to produce enough?
I think we'll see, a little bit less area go in, but obviously going to depend on the weather and how the yields turn out.
And when is the seeding starting in Australia?
At the moment. So in 4 or 6 weeks' time, we should have a good idea of how many acres have gone in and how the planting conditions have been.
So the growers have kind of decided as to they're just putting it in the ground or not now?
Yes.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay. Will, what is your opinion with India again, with these quantitative restrictions? Your crop is going to come out soon. Let's talk about your weather. How is it looking so far?
The Russian crop was late seeded by roughly 2 to 3 weeks, but it's been hot and dry. If you look at the weather charts, if you looked at the 30-day weather, you would see there was a problem coming. If you look at the 60 to 90 days, you'd realise that March was one of the wettest they've had. So the crop's in fairly good condition. It does need rain in the next 1 to 2 weeks, otherwise we'll start to see the yields come down.
And with this quantitative restrictions, are there any vessels which were being loaded and anything that was going into India which is now disrupted? What's happening with that?
Bulk vessels, no. Containers, yes. We saw some cheap trades going into Pakistan and other origins. We've seen coasters trading into the Spanish market, the Italian market for feed, which is actually, the thing is, as the markets come down, it's buying demand for feed.
So basically all these extra peas, we don't have to worry.
Yeah, they're going to be consumed. At these sort of prices, the demand is going to be pulled away for the feed market, which is plenty big enough to consume everything that's left.
I see. And there were the rumors from Russia at one time, from China at one time that China will start consuming Russian peas.
Yep, I've heard that as well. At the moment, there is no protocol. There is some discussion that there's some overland stuff that goes by train through Siberia, but the volume's pretty small. But yes, if the Chinese switch on and start taking Russian peas, we look at the consumption they're taking out of Canada this year, they're taking, 98 million tonne of beans, so...
I see. So, Ahmed, Pakistan has enjoyed with all these defaults or whatever you call it, from, cargo being on water. What was the lowest number you bought?
I think the lowest price rated was $250, and I can understand your what you meant by enjoyment. So we were the one who faced the most difficult time because whenever there was a problem with India, prices came down and we had all high prices contracts. So yeah, we really enjoyed it.
But at these levels, I'm sure, the markets will support very well 250, 260 number, whatever that number is. Because in Canada, you cannot buy these numbers. Is there anything coming out from Canada to Pakistan at all? Or?
See, Russia, Ukraine, all these CIS countries, now, if the price difference between Canadian and Russian is more than $10, then Pakistan will only buy Russian, Ukraine, Baltic origin cargo. And if it's less than that, then we'll only for Canada origin. I don't remember buying Canadian origin for Pakistan this year. We haven't bought any. Yeah, and demand is good. These prices are really good. I mean, it's not only that good demand should be good, people should even stock at these prices, no? Because these are really low price.
So would your yellow peas go into feed as well in Pakistan or no?
I doubt. There are some other products which are cheaper, like you see in Africa, some tour business was done, $220, $230. So that is even cheaper. You can make some tur dal and put the other ones for the feed. So I don't think so still it's going on the feed side.
I see. So, Rakeshji, what's your opinion in coming new crop? Let's say Baltic origin is from July, August, something like that?
Yeah, you got new crop Russian available
Yeah,
July.
July, August, and Canada, September, October, we will have 4-5 million tons of peas again in the world.
But I think India, it all depends upon the government, whether they allow import or not. But by my views, government won't allow the imports, any further imports till the prices stabilize in India, domestic market of chickpeas and tur dal especially. Because next year being the election year, government anyhow will be wanting to please farmers, and I don't think so government will allow any imports.
You don't think so? Huh?
I don't think so.
So, what do you think right now in the pipeline in India with yellow peas? Like, how much do you guys have in stock?
See, I heard I think around 400,000 tons, something around 250,000 tons in Western Port, 150,000 tons in Calcutta and Kakinada, other ports. Total 400,000 tons in stock in India and another 150,000 tons en route in containers and vessel load, which were loaded prior to 24th, on or before 24th.
Right, I know.
Because in any way, we cannot count on 25th loading until unless we get the quota or the license we require from the government.
So right now, the difference between desi chickpeas and yellow peas in the local market is very small.
Yeah, hardly $15, $20.
So does the desi consumption increase right now or no?
It will take some time, and I think it has picked up already. The market have reacted. It has gone up, And last week or you can say fortnight, the market has, not fortnight, last 10 days, the market has increased by 2%, something like that. So it's reacting. It obviously have an impact, no doubt. This policy of government to increase the chickpea price is good. But again, as a trader, we are losing.
But the government intervention, definitely, it creates problems for traders.
For everyone. Like we Indians are also suffering. There were cargoes when the government implemented 50% duty. So we had to pay duty and then we had to put the cargo for 4 months, 5 months in the warehouse. And when the price came into parity, then we are selling. So the problem is for everyone, whether it be Indian or the foreign trader, anyone.
When this duty came into effect, I think it was almost October or November.
I think if I'm correct, it was around 8th November.
8th November.
Yes.
So I remember that we were all talking that these prices will go back to 2002, 2003 levels, which were almost $200 a ton. There were a lot of talks about that. People started shorting peas, and China came into big time at that time. And did you feel that effect in that region as well, or the prices in Baltic region was almost the same?
It went back in 2000.
No, recently, like when in November.
No, the prices have gone sideways, really. Farmer has reached the level now where the prices are too low. The farmer is not just a single commodity seller. He's got other commodities, the prices are better, it gives him a better return. He'll sit on the peas.
Because the biggest, with all these restrictions, China has opened up a lot, and with recent trade, not war, I would say, but all these Mr. Trump's policies that you would call it, with soybean duties that may be imposed in China, these yellow pea numbers, S&D, will be skyrocketing. Like we will see huge demand for the feed industry, and already the yellow peas are going into feed into China. So I'm not sure this Indian policy, how much it will be good for India in the end of the day.
See, until unless there is any weather anomaly in India, until unless there is any drought, I think this policy will be good, because India itself wants to become self-sufficient and self-dependent on pulses. So they want to promote farmers growing more pulses. And if the price levels in India domestically are high, farmers will opt for pulses, growing pulses only.
Generally, the pulses everywhere in the world are grown mainly for India.
Yes. Exactly.
Either it is Canada, Australia. India is largest consumer of pulses. So what is happening is that everybody is planning to decrease production, and maybe we might not see that effect this year, but if this policy continues, the production of pulses will go down further, it seems.
See, lately,
And 1 year of bad weather will create a havoc in the world.
see, government again are taking steps, they are trying to prepare buffer stocks, which they will keep for at least a year or more than a year. And every day they are rotating the buffer stock. They're selling the old one and buying again the new one. So they are well planned in this. And I hope that, like, weather is very unpredictable, If something is there, we are ready to face. We are after the government only. If there is any anomaly, we are ready to face.
I see. Ahmed, Pakistan is becoming a large importer of yellow peas. Why not import bulk vessels?
Well,
It's still 5 container documents. It's a big issue for yellow peas, isn't it?
I think all the big ones, big guns know they have retired from the business. The small ones have made them retire. So the 5 container business has destroyed the big traders, and now the business is being handled by small traders, and there are so many of them. So if a big gun brings up, like, say 10-15,000 tons, the 5 containers will keep on selling. They will take the loss of 5 containers, and he can't survive now.
The yellow peas is almost like 250,000 tons a year. It's a decent size of imports into Bangladesh is also almost the same number. But in Bangladesh, there's hardly container trade. Like from Baltic origin, Bangladesh is also a big buyer for that? Or?
From the Baltics, no. not
No?
really.
Okay. So
Russia, yes.
Sorry?
They take some Russian.
They do? Okay. All right. Because
But the Bangladeshi market is, I would say, they're more into they will take the bulk vessels because they have the economies of scale. They would traditionally normally be a Canadian buyer because they like the quality as well.
right. So yeah, the Russian, Ukrainian peas are not famous in Bangladesh at the moment.
They're starting to take them.
They're starting to take. All right. Okay.
We've seen a few vessels go that way.
Let's now hear from our audience with questions they may have for us. Hopefully we have enough time to answer them. How do these questions come up?
I think it should come on your mobile.
On my cell phone? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have my app.
Well, you can take mine.
Just let me check.
Sorry about that. You got too much. All right. Thank you. Okay, the first question is, with soya meal, soybean prices, corn and wheat trending higher, do you see peas entering feed markets in South and Central America for poultry and swine? I guess I will answer that question, or do you?
Not being a South American expert, but I would think that's less and less likely because of the production of soybeans being so close to home in South America that you would expect them to stay on the traditional beans. It's where you've got to transport the beans to. We're seeing the peas being used.
All right. The other question was the import of Black Sea yellow peas allowed directly to Chinese ports legally and complying with all these issues. So I think we answered that question before.
Yeah, we went through that one before.
Can you go over FOB prices for yellow split peas? You don't do that, all right?
I think you missed a few.
Have I?
How much quantity of CYP?
How much quantity of CYP, which is, I guess, yellow peas?
Canadian yellow peas.
Canadian yellow peas, okay. Would find other homes post Indian scenario of increased import duty on quantity restriction, pricing of Canadian farmers, traders for new crop. As I said, the Canadian yellow peas, the market, China has taken over that market. Like even India is now out of the equation the whole year. We only exported 200,000 tons. So China has become the biggest market. And if these soybean meal duties come into play into China, then a lot more peas will be consumed there. Okay, so the next question is, we are very strange there is no people from China to attend this panel of peas. Now China is #1 buyer of peas, total 1.27 million tons. Yes, I agree. Next year we will have someone over here from China. I know somebody there already. There's a question from Rennie. There are new value-added plants being built in North America. What do you see happening in terms of new usage of yellow peas by value-added sector? Yes, there are a lot of fractioning happening over there. As I said, the local consumption, we are estimating 900,000 tons, which is being also used for pet food. And there was a big plant coming up in Portage, but that has been delayed for another 2 years or so. So in North America, yes, there is a lot of consumption happening in peas at the moment.
And that's it? Was this the last one? Or?
I think I'm missing some. How much premium do you think the market can pay US origin versus Canada for green peas? It seems all the questions are based on North America. So. Obviously, there are a lot of different varieties in USA. There is banner type and striker types, and even India pays big premiums on green peas.
Yes. I think US green peas, we can pay a premium of $20 over Canadian green peas. And we are able to sell like in the domestic market also at a premium.
There are different varieties, obviously,
yes,
and then, I've even heard almost $100 differences.
Yeah,
in
maybe, yes,
in
exactly,
premium.
yes.
Ahmed, there's a question directly for you. Ahmed from Awam, can you please update on GMO issue from Pakistan quarantine?
Well, Pakistan plant quarantine have announced pretty earlier also, but now they are saying that they would enforce it, that Pakistan will only import non-GMO cargo into Pakistan. So countries who are exporting should mention clearly on the phytosanitary certificate that the product is non-GMO. With Canada, Pakistan plant quarantine has an agreement, so Canada does not need to write on the phyto, but for other countries where we don't have an agreement, they do need to write it.
The other question is, how is the Baltic quality of peas different from Ukraine, Russia, and Canada? And what is the carryover from Baltic states? Of course.
The carryover in the Baltic states is between 200 and 250,000 tons, we think, this year. Don't forget the 25% less planted next year. In terms of the quality, it's very subjective. You remember we talk about Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania with these countries. They had, last year, massively different weather at harvest. The northern state, Estonia, had the worst weather. So it's been very variable out of the Baltics this year. What we found is some very good quality and also some lower quality in that part of the world.
So in that region, like in Canada, we are mainly, we are now doing farm-addressed peas as well, but in Russia, Ukraine, which are the largest market for peas, do we have that capacity to ship clean product as well, or is it just farm-addressed?
Predominantly, it's all farm-addressed. It's the same for the Baltics as well. It's a bulk-handled system. Most of the peas are coming out of Russia. They're transshipped in coasters, brought out through Kavkaz. As you know, Russia has had an enormous wheat crop and barley crop. So the direct deep water ports being Novorossiysk and Taman, they have been monopolized by the big commodities because they can move more volume. So the pulses have been pushed out to Rostov, out of Rostov, Azov, to come through Kavkaz. With that sort of movement program, it doesn't work to clean them.
All right. There is another question. How much part of yellow peas demand of India will shift to desis if import restrictions continue? That's for you.
I didn't get you.
How much part of yellow peas demand of India will shift to desis if the import restrictions continue?
Well, if there's no yellow peas in India, we have to shift to yellow peas, chickpeas and other pulses. I think India is having around 400,000 tons ready stock in hand, another 150,000 in pipeline. So it will last maximum for 2 months if government don't allow anything beyond that quantity. So we have to automatically shift to other pulses, whether it be chickpeas, tur dal or anything. And the production in India of yellow peas is very small. It's around 400,000 tons to 500,000 tons. We expect next year that it may go to 800,000 tons to 900,000 tons. But when production is very small, but we will be forced to shift to other crops like chickpeas and all.
So there could be a big demand for desi chickpeas in your local market coming soon.
Yes,
Since There aren't much yellow peas there. Probably a month or 2 months of supply.
Yeah, obviously there will be good demand of chickpeas, and government expecting this have come out with this policy. And just now I received a message that Delhi DGFT, Director General of Foreign Trade, has advised their offices not to issue any registration certificate for yellow peas until further notice.
What does that mean now?
Government won't be issuing any registration certificates against the advance payment, means until further notice from the head office.
So that means that even that 100,000 tons.
No, 100,000 tons is already on sea, or we have imported around 40 to 50,000 tons already, and another 50,000 tons or 60,000 tons already on sea. That will be imported. But we were expecting further quotas, registration certificates for the contract for which we have already made advance payment.
So that was the 500,000 tons
Yes,
that I was talking about.
Yes, so government has asked their offices to hold that registration certificate. They won't be issuing it.
So even if they're afloat, they...
No, afloat they will allow. Anything loaded before 25th April, they have to allow under para 1.05 of import-export policy of DGFT, they have to allow that. But anything loaded on or after 25th, they won't allow.
There's a question for you, Bill. We find that Russian yellow peas sometimes have a coat of dust on them. Farmer-dressed Canadian product does not have same. What is going wrong in Russia?
Difficult one to answer. It's Russia. It can be very variable.
You got to be on the ground and see some yellow peas for yourself in Russia and find out.
Indeed. I mean, the qualities we see out of Russia this year has been some of the best peas we've seen from Russia in a long time. But the Russian farmer, you're dealing with some units that are 20,000 hectares, some units are 2 hectares.
Really?
So the style, the varieties, the husbandry and the handling techniques are vastly different.
I see. There's a question about what about split yellow peas and split green peas supply demand. I don't have those stats on me, so I can't say that. How much next Black Sea crop do you expect?
Including the carry-in, around 3 million tons, but it could be down to 2.5 and it could be up to 3.5. You tell me what the weather's going to do in the next 3 weeks.
And how much is that used in feed?
Well, we expect the Russian feed demand to rise. Give or take, it could be anything up to 2 million tons of feed demand. But again, with the high soy meal prices, the feed demand is only rising.
So approximately 3 million tons Black Sea production, and almost 2 million tons of that would be
2 million tons of domestic consumption.
So there's a big domestic consumption in Russia for peas as well.
Yes, it's growing all the time because Russia stopped importing meat from the EU. They were the EU's biggest customer for meat products, pork, chicken predominantly. So all of that production has now shifted into Russia. A lot of that production is in Siberia, where a lot of the carry-out is. And those products, it just doesn't pay to move them to the port. It's cheaper to feed them to the pigs.
I see. There is a question, what's the new crop peas from Russia? And then Canada as well, but...
Is in price?
Yeah, new crop.
We're not going to be putting prices out of Russia at the moment because to compete and to where consumers think they need to be, I need to be sub-wheat price, and I'm not going to buy a ton of peas at that.
Canadian price would be similar as to what is happening right now. China is anywhere from $295 through $305, and for India, $325, $330 in containers, but obviously there's not much trade happening on that. Are yellow peas really a good substitute for soybeans? I would say so for feed, yes.
Yeah, well...
the price is right, yes. For the feed market, that works very well.
Yeah.
With growing starch requirement in China, peas imports are 1.2 million. How much Indian demand it can replace in next 1 to 5 years' time? China imports are 1.2. How much Indian demand it can replace? Well, again, China is a growing market. The P values it is the cheapest pulse in the world, and China will continue to import in large quantities. How much it can replace, it all depends on the feed consumption as well. If the feed market picks up, the China can, from 1.5, can easily go to 2.5 million tons. What is the scope of pea protein in the coming years?
As in growth. There's statistics that the North American fractionation market's growing 15 to 18% a year. There's a lot of plants going in, a lot of development. It's becoming an extremely fashionable product because it's gluten-free. I think that's a very important point, that the domestic consumption in North America will increase given people's health concerns, the number of Americans who claim to be gluten intolerant. They've got to get the protein, and peas is a very good source.
I got a question for you, Hannah. You think Australian farmers will ever be competing for volumes of peas with Black Sea in the next few seasons?
I highly doubt it, Farhan, but obviously it's the lowest price pulse crop in Australia at the moment. So in the short term, and unless India opens its doors again, I highly doubt it.
What is the total demand for feed peas in Spain and Italy? You mentioned meal prices at quite high levels, so this will create new demand.
Yes. Spain buys 4 million tons of soy meal a year.
Sorry?
Spain buys 4 million tons of soy meal a year. So if soy meal prices stay high, peas stay low, then they'll consume it.
Okay. I think we are almost finished on time. Maybe last question. How do we see the stock to use ratio of global yellow peas this year versus last year? The year has not ended yet, so I think we both can put a note on that. I would say that, again, human consumption, yes, we can see that the consumption level has been lower, but in terms of the feed production, the feed acceptability of yellow peas has enlarged a lot. So the stock to use ratio
coming down. Given the current price structure,
is
it's the cheapest protein, it's got to be fed.
Okay. I think we have answered most of the questions.
I have one question. Rakesh ji, how much is your crop dependent on weather? I mean, there are ways to get certain confirmation of a crop. Do you think it's 100% dependent on crop? On the weather?
See, it's not 100% dependent on weather. Government has been working on irrigation system, and they have been planning to join all the rivers. So even if there is drought, they can irrigate the fields.
So they're using it for pulses also?
Yes, for every crop. And yes, if there is a severe drought and there is no rain, even the monsoon fails, then it will be a tough situation for India. But this year, the prediction is that we will be having a normal monsoon, almost 96% normal. So I don't think there will be any issue this year.
All right. I would like to thank all of you for your valuable time, especially Will. Again, I know it was very short notice for you. Thank you very much. Thank you. And please enjoy your time in Colombo, and remember to eat your peas, whether they are green, yellow, snow, sugar, snap, or mushy. Life is good when we have world peace.
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Farhan. Thank you, everyone.
On that note, peace be with the panel too. And may I request the panel to give us a memento photograph up front and then exit stage from right. Thank you, Farhan, for that wonderful session, great session, the peace panel. This peace panel was sponsored by Marina Commodities. We'd like to thank our sponsor for doing such a wonderful job. Here's the peace panel, ladies and gentlemen. Give a big round of applause. They kept it light and they kept it full of information. Our final panel for the day is also going to be very interesting. It's on global chickpeas, the Daisy outlook. On the panel, we have Peter Wilson from AGT Foods Australia. With Peter on the panel, it's always going to be very lively. Please also welcome from Ghazi Commodities, Bangladesh, Fahim Wahab Ghazi. Stepping up next from EMCO International UAE, it's Atik Ansari. From Glencoe Agriculture, Saurabh Bhartia. From Pakistan, Bilal Dhoni of Dhoni and Company. And to complete the panel from the Indo-Global SME Chamber, please welcome Dr. Bharat Kulkarni. As we start the panel, I'd like to remind you that this panel has been sponsored by Omega Traders. This is the Global Desi Chickpeas Outlook panel, and it's over to Peter Wilson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Put your hand up if you can't hear me. Thanks, Todd. Well, I know that when you speak in the last session, you never want to speak, you never want to keep in between people and their beverages, so we'll try and make this as snappy as we possibly can and as upbeat as it possibly can be given the circumstances we find the international pulse trade in today. So my job is to try and stick-handle this esteemed group on my right and what a talented group they are. So we've got some great numbers people here and people who really understand how the product's being consumed, where it's being consumed, the likely trends for consumption, because we need to be talking about the future. Whilst we have some issues we're dealing with today, at the end of the day, we will continue to produce and consume desi chickpeas for the same period in the future that we have been in history. So they're old and very, very useful food product and consumed in large volumes by a huge slice of the world's population. So they're not going anywhere soon, but we have to digest a few little issues in the short term. So I'm going to try and set the scene here this afternoon, and then we're going to sit down with the panellists and try and, I guess, break open the word, which is the desi chickpea market and its future. As soon as we can work this out, where am I pointing? It's always good when the technology works. So I guess we can ad lib here for a little bit. You just want me to say change, or? All right, so if everybody can make sure they read this statement verbatim, I think that just basically means that anything I say can't be held against me at any stage in the future. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've introduced the panellists, so we can move on to the next slide, but the bottom line is we've got good coverage, good regional coverage, and plenty of skills in the room. Okay, so the issues that we're going to try and cover here today are the supply and demand of the crop we're talking about, but also we're going to talk about the cash supply and demand. We've definitely got some issues in the world today with regards to cash flow and stability and all the rest of it. We're going to talk about open markets versus intervention, and we've got the Colombo Accord to help propel this industry forward and to try and take some ownership back to our national organisations to try and work with our governments to see if we can't convince various countries to play by reasonable rules, but for their own good as well. It's not just a question of people who come from countries like Australia, Canada, the United States or the UK or Europe being angry about what countries in the Indian sub or the Middle East might do. The reality is that good and fair and free trade is good for everybody. We're going to talk about supply chain integrity because there are people in this room and indeed in this trade that are trying to trade multi-million-dollar contracts and products with no money. So at the end of the day, we shouldn't be in this business if we don't have any money. So if you're a buyer and you think it's fun to say, look, I'll have a crack at this, I'll buy 500 or 1,000 tonnes off Peter Wilson, but I have no intention of executing if the market goes down, then the door is over there. You'll see the light coming in if you can exit. So there is a serious issue. This is a serious business, and there needs to be true integrity or an intention to play by contractual rules if you indeed are going to play the game. We know there's a lot of geopolitical instability right now. You'd have to be living under a rock if you weren't aware of the certain issues that are going on in the Indian sub and of course the Middle East and North Africa. There are serious issues that impact global trade. And there's also the reality of the production systems that we have in competition. It's not just Australian farmers competing with Ukrainian farmers or Canadian farmers. We've got production systems in conflict. We've got highly mechanised and industrial agriculture in many parts of the developed world, and we have a lot of very rudimentary agricultural practices being carried out in much of the rest of the developing world. So it's fair to say that there's a bit of a clash of civilisations occurring, but there is still possibilities for us to transfer knowledge between ourselves in terms of the techniques and technologies being used to try and assist all of the production systems to be as profitable as they can be. The other thing that's been raised a couple of times in the last day or so is the reality of water, fresh water availability, water use efficiency, and particularly as we consider pulses as an incredibly powerful vegetable protein in a world that is rapidly getting short of moisture and where production of other forms of protein, namely animal proteins, continues to become more expensive. So it's logical that we're in the right space here, and I think it's important that we talk positively about the role that pulses, particularly in the role that desi chickpeas play with providing good, healthful nutrition, but with a really soft environmental footprint. Okay, so let's talk about the situation that is India in terms of the journey that India has been on since a rapid rise in prices in 2015. And I put a little slide in here. This is where everybody was happy. Prices weren't too bad, and my customer was overall reasonably happy with prices. They became less so as the market expanded in the end of 2015 and of course 2016. Prices skyrocketed, and then we've had a range of government intervention and activities, particularly in India, that sought to soothe the price for the consumer. And then on top of that, we demonetised in there, we got rid of 500,000 rupee notes. That sort of really cruelled a lot of the liquidity that was being involved in a whole range of trades, but in particular the pulse trade. We added a GST. We started raiding offices and asking people to empty their warehouses when it wasn't economic to do so. We raided companies' offices to see whether there was wrongdoing or market manipulation. To my knowledge, at this point, no charges have been laid. So we've had a lot of intervention, really solid and angry intervention, particularly in India, and saying, we're not making any money, you better help us out. And of course, that's triggered a whole range of other realities in terms of duties and technical bans and quotas, etc., etc. And that's not going away anytime soon for some of the reasons that have already been outlined. We have key things that are going on in India in the next 6 to 12 months, all of them to do with elections. So far be it for me to suggest this is not just about supply and demand. So if we look at, it's hard to have a discussion about pulses and even harder to have a discussion about desi chickpeas if you're not considering India. So India is the engine room for pulse demand globally. There's no getting away from that. 33%, largest consumer, producer of edible pulses in the world. That's just the reality. The other reality is that we're going to continue to see India require imports. And we'll discuss it. I don't want to preempt what we might discuss, but my personal view is we're really going to struggle to see India self-sufficient on a whole range of things because it'll be like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. They can be sufficient on some things, but that's going to lead into insufficiency or deficit on other things. So it's going to be a rotating issue because we have land use constraints, we have definitely got issues with regards to water availability, and so at the end of the day, we have a very, very large population on a shrinking landmass because of industrialisation, etc., etc. But you can see the impact of legislative change or government intervention where we've seen Indian pulse imports, selected pulse imports, largely collapse since the end of December. And that's going to continue to dry up here as they force the market to consume the stocks that are in position. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, but that's just the reality. I always like to talk a little bit about the realities of increasing, and this is what I'm excited about. I'm excited about both these slides, and that is because there has been an uninterrupted, largely uninterrupted, growth in real terms, in real prices for DESI-type chickpeas in India. There is a significant slice of inelasticity in DESI chickpea demand, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And this is where I talk about the spread of DESI chickpeas relative to yellow peas. If we all accept that yellow peas largely have equilibrium, we have yellow peas available at any time of the day or night that someone wants to buy a yellow pea, they're available. So if we accept they're the base load in the yellow pulse or the yellow cotyledon supply equation, then anything that spreads off that it's not an unreasonable argument to talk about whether it's inelastic or elastic in terms of its pricing. And we're seeing over the last several years, we've seen pulses, or certainly DESI chickpeas, increase the price premium relative to yellow peas. So it tells me that there is still solid demand growth in DESI chickpeas in India and for those countries that are consuming the product in similar fashion. So this is a good news slide. But of course, it's a long-term slide, and my view is that trend will continue. Even though we're having a little bit of a gutting right now, I think that trend line will continue to be positive for the spread between peas and DESI chickpeas. That's a slide you can't see very well, but this is, my view is that we don't really have a pulse problem in the world, we have a wheat problem in the world. And the wheat problem in the world is too much wheat. So we're sitting around 37% stocks to use. Now, the market recently is suggesting that wheat is trying to get up off the mat here. I'm not a bull. I can't make a bull case for wheat unless we have a major problem in the Black Sea or somewhere else. And of course, that problem might actually be also developing in Australia. But the reality is we're sitting on about 170 million tonnes of global wheat stocks, largely sitting, doing nothing, being financed by a whole range of people, from the trading houses to banks to farmers. Now, until we can start writing the balance sheet on wheat, now maybe we see feed demand kick in on corn and we start seeing wheat being fed in much greater tonnes to start rebalancing this thing. But this is what's driving acres into alternate crops such as pulses. This is why we're talking about Kazakhstan producing red lentils, because they beat the crap out of growing wheat. And the same decisions are being made by farmers all around the world. But recently, in the last 100 days, we've seen about 20% increase in soy milk futures. We're starting to see protein get some legs here. And guess what? We're trading protein products. Mid-protein, surely, but we're still trading the protein complex. So let's not forget there is a linkage between pulse acres, DESI chickpea acres, and underlying alternatives, which are cereals and driven by wheat. We won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but there you go. India, the king of pulse shipments, certainly in DESI chickpeas, and that's a slice of 8 years condensed in those destination markets. You can say India is so very important to anybody producing DESI chickpeas. Bangladesh, number 2, sorry Fahim, not quite to number 1, but a little bit of work at it, it'll happen. But, and of course, India's not there anymore, Sarab, so it looks like Bangladesh could actually have a bit of a crack at you. Pakistan, very, very important, not to take anything away from the importance that Pakistan is in terms of the DESI market, and the UAE, and we'll hear from Atiq on what's happening in that UAE market. New entrant in terms of direct shipments, we're seeing Iran in there, and Iran took, I think, 30 or 40,000 tonnes during the 16-17 year, so emerging market looking for good quality Desi chickpeas. We now need to see what happens as a result of the decision out of the US overnight in terms of whether Iran continues to emerge as a significant player on the global stage or not. But they are an important market for us all to consider. We know that the king of consumption is India. We also know the king of production of Desi chickpeas in India, with the rest of us a little bit of bagatelle. So changes in Indian consumption and production are significant to the global Desi chickpea market outlook. My view, for what it's worth, because I'm a natural bull, I like being bullish, I'm not looking at this year, because I think this year is done and dusted. Stocks in Australia are horribly tight. They are very tight. If anybody thinks that there is a burdensome position right now in Australia on Desi chickpeas, then they'd be wrong. There is no question the supply burden does sit in India. I'm prepared to acknowledge that. But there is not a supply burden in Australia. And I did some rough numbers in the last couple of days. And for April to the end of our marketing season, which is September, typically we're punching out between 120 and 230,000 tonnes, average of about 180,000 tonnes to be shipped over the next little while until the next crop, assuming we get one. Now, we don't think there's a hell of a lot of product left. So in actual fact, we're very snug for old crop. We've already shipped 650,000 tonnes so far out of potentially an 850,000 crop on top of a 2.1 million tonnes shipped last year. So we didn't have a lot of carry-in. So the Australian situation is actually fairly tight, and therefore it's very, very hard to buy Desi chickpeas today from Australian farmers. So if we porpoise into 2019, I think we see lower production in Australia. I certainly think that we'll see lower seedings in October, November, December in India, and therefore lower production. So I think 2019, look out, get your hat. It's going to be exciting. So in terms of things we want to try and cover, we know the market's turbulent. There's a lot of stuff going on. And as I said yesterday in the Colombo Accord discussion, we've all got to spend a lot more time on the MAD components of our business. That's market maintenance, access and development. We cannot be asleep in terms of servicing our markets, not just from the importers, but making sure our governments are talking to other governments and making sure we're not doing anything silly. So with that, we'll move to the panel. You ready, guys?
Yep.
Is this working? All right. Okay, so we did meet a little bit earlier, so this is it's sort of rehearsed, but it should be okay. There was a bit of nervousness around the table this morning at breakfast, but I think we had it nailed. So let's talk, we have to talk about India first. India is most important. We have Saurabh and I've got a lot of time for Saurabh. I always say he's the best numbers man in the Indian subcontinent.
Oh,
in fact, he's probably the only person in India who does numbers, so that makes him, doesn't necessarily make him not necessarily the best, but I think he's genuinely the best. So let's talk a little bit about how we got to where we are and just what's happening today in the Indian market.
Okay, so basically Indian government is struggling with low prices. Their mandate for last 2 years, ever since 2015-16, when they saw pulse prices skyrocketing, is to make India as self-sufficient in pulses. We have seen very high prices of chickpeas in 2016 and 2017, and Indian farmer has reacted to the high prices. We have seen record production this year.
What do you think that is?
Well, it's tough to debate on the production numbers because it's a big country. There are very different yield estimates, but I would stick to the base number of government for 2016, say, which was 7 million tons in 2016. In 2017, government says that the production increased by 9.3 million tons. Fair enough, taking that also into consideration because we had good yields last year, we had acreage up, so production increased by 30%. But 2018, when again the government says that the production is up by 2 million tons, I have doubts on that. Yes, we have better crop than last year for sure because there was an increased acreage, But in terms of yield, Indian government is using the record yield that India has ever seen in the past decade. But when we look at the vegetative health index for March 2018 and compare it with the vegetative health index for last 6-7 years, India had the most stressed crop this year compared to the last 5 to 7 years. So in terms of yield, I doubt that we have such a great yield that we can have an 11 million ton crop. But for argument's sake, let's say the crop is like 10.2 million tons compared to 9 million tons of last year.
Is the problem more that we just don't have the liquidity to absorb that product as a farmer wants to sell? Is that the thing that's creating, the lower prices and the turbulence locally?
To an extent, yes. There has been liquidity issues with banks going tight on most of the pulse companies since 2015-16 onwards. A lot of importers in India have had major defaults on the foreign suppliers, but not only that. In their own balance sheets, they have stressed assets and everything because we have seen prices drop from $1,000 to $500. Or $600 in chickpeas, $2,000 pigeon peas have come down to $600. Lentils, $1,000 have come down to $400. So these are like massive losses that Indian importers or traders have suffered because of which they have defaulted on their payments to the bank and all those things. So that's why the banks have gone tight in terms of liquidity. But it's not that government is not doing efforts to consume this production that is coming into the market. So far, Indian government has already procured like 800,000 tons in just 30 days. I think by mid-June, Indian government would have procured 1.5 million tons. They have also, in the state of MP, they had asked the farmers not to bring the product into the market until June. They had designated warehouses where farmer could go and deliver his stock, take 10-20% funds that he needs for his needs, and he could sell his crop like in September, October at MSP to the government. So it's not that government is not doing anything. They are doing the efforts to ensure that the farmers are able to sell their product into the market. There are a lot of local traders and companies who are buying in the domestic market at current values because the prices are attractive. So yes, I think it's not that there is no liquidity in the market. Overall, the market is depressed because of oversupply. It's the glut situation, which will get solved in 6 to 7 months.
Thank you. Flipping to, the number 2 market for him. Talk a little bit about the Bangladesh market. We've already shipped year to date from Australia about 170,000 tonnes, which since October, with a very, very big March shipment, a couple of bulk vessels going in there. How do you see the balance of the marketing year, and how do you see the Bangladeshi market, generally speaking?
Hello, everyone. First, I'd like to thank Peter for allowing me the opportunity to present the Bangladeshi perspective today. I feel that Bangladesh is often the overlooked middle child of the pulse buying family, that is the Indian subcontinent. India, of course, is the overachiever. Pakistan is the goofy, free-spirited one.
India's not the overachiever at the moment. It's very naughty.
But give it some time, it'll be accepted back into the fold. Bangladesh has a consumption of about average 200,000 tons, plus minus 20% depending on the price. And compared to India and Pakistan, our consumption pattern is quite different in the sense that only about, I want to say 5%, but let's say 10% of the desi chickpeas is actually milled into chana dal or flour. So we use yellow peas for that. Chickpeas is consumed whole. About 90% is consumed whole, either roasted or in a cooked form with the skin.
So size and colour are important?
Size and consistent size and bold size and light seed coat color is very important for us. And there's no really substitute for chickpeas. The demand is there, it's a consistent demand. And the local crop. Due to the changing consumer taste, the growth rate will be very nominal, according to me. but it will be stable around the 200, 250. We might see in a couple of years the market going up to 250. But I expect that the growth will not be too high. It'll be nominal growth. Yeah.
Wonderful. Flipping to Pakistan, Bilal, Pakistan is starting to reignite in terms of buying. I mean, even though India had very good production, and I think it's indisputed that even though it was a little dry during the production period, much of the Indian Desi area grew a pretty handy crop. I think that's agreed. But once you push in the northwestern part of the Indian sub, which includes Pakistan, it wasn't so good, was it? Terms of productive output.
No, although India's had a pretty bumper crop in the range of 10 to 10.5 million tons for desis. On the flip side, it wasn't the case in Pakistan. Our figures came out between 300 to 350,000 tons versus a consumption of 700,000 tons. So we had half the production of what our consumption is, which is why Pakistan has been in the market on and off. And in 2018, year to date, we have imported close to 60 to 70,000 metric tons from Australia. And, we feel that this demand is going to continue because there is a shortfall of product in the local market right now.
So does that suggest for the balance of the year you may have to bring in close to 300,000 tons?
For the balance of the year, yes, but the Australian new crop is going to come out in October. The shipments are going to arrive in mid-December, I believe. Until that time, I think Pakistan is going to need another 100,000 tons to satisfy the local demand. And then after that, we're going to roll into buying new crop from Australia as well.
Very good. Bharat, where are you seeing most of the product being produced in Africa? Maybe summarise where you see production at the present time, where it's come from and where it's going, and in terms of production, but also where you see your export destination markets.
So Africa, when we say Africa, there are 4 or 5 countries that produce chickpea, the major being Tanzania and Ethiopia, with minor quantities coming from Kenya, Sudan, Uganda, Eritrea. So these are small, but the major comes from Tanzania and Ethiopia. Ethiopia is the largest producer within Africa with about, it's one of the it's the 7th largest producer of chickpeas, desi chickpeas in the world. So a lot of chickpeas produced in Ethiopia, average around 300 to 350,000 tons is produced every year. Last 2 years have been, much better for the production. Last year, the production was around 380,000 tons. Whereas this year it has gone up to close to 420 to 430,000 tons is what is expected. So Ethiopia is major producer, but it's not the major exporter because there's a lot of local demand. About 15 to 20% of the produce gets exported.
That's an interesting point because it's a relatively new product for Ethiopia in terms of new 10 or 15 years, 20 years in volume?
Not really, because the traditional Ethiopian food has an important, if you look at the traditional Ethiopian food, it's injera and shiro. Now, shiro is made out of the powder of, or the flour of chickpeas. So it has been part of their, culinary culture for many years now. So it's not really new to Ethiopia, but yes, export has been new. There's a fasting season in Ethiopia where all the Orthodox Christians fast for 60 days, and they don't consume any meat in that period. That is the time when the consumption of shiro goes up, and that's where the demand for the locally produced chickpeas is higher. Close to 80% of what Ethiopia produces is actually consumed internally. So Ethiopia may be a largest producer in the world, but not so much when it comes to export contribution. Major export destinations of Ethiopia have been Pakistan. India, because the size is a little bit smaller, about 3 to 6 mm is what the Ethiopian desi chickpea is. So not much of that goes to India, but Pakistan last year they had, and this year again, there are issues because of the phytosanitary issues, where Pakistan has banned the import of desi chickpeas from Ethiopia. So that has led to say, accumulation of carryover stock. About 50,000 tons of carryover stock is lying in Ethiopia with some bumper production which has come this year.
What's the local price, say FOB equivalent for Desis in Ethiopia? Local price, US dollars, FOB.
The current prevailing local price is equivalent to around $600 per ton.
So that's about above
Yes.
where Pakistan is buying.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bharat. Moving, of course, last but not least, I think, let's talk about the UAE market. I mean, it's an incredible market, incredible story in terms of, what has happened in the UAE in terms of Dubai's development as a destination, not just for agri-prods, but for aircraft and just what's happened in that whole region. So let's talk a little bit about why Desi demand in Dubai, where very little is consumed.
Yeah, I mean, Dubai is probably one of the not Dubai, the UAE is probably one of the most inelastic markets when it comes to price because the consumers don't switch so easily. I mean, it's a little bit high, I would say high income, but the middle class has a better affording capability than normal. Dubai, I mean, the UAE has been importing chana mainly for splitting, used by the snack manufacturers, and we have not forget the population of the UAE has grown over the last 10 years, almost doubled. So we have a population of close to 9 million people, of which 6 to 7 million people are from the subcontinent. So the main consumption is lentils and peas and chickpeas, of course. We've seen a steady growth over the years. So last year, Dubai imported anywhere between 80 to 100,000 tons. I say anywhere because most of it also, you have not forget, is a very big re-export destination. So Dubai exports a lot of cargo from, it's used as an export hub from Dubai to Iran and to Iraq and to other neighboring countries. Another interesting development that's taken place over the last 2 years is the consumption of desis into Iran. So all of a sudden, I mean, of course, there's sanctions and other things, but we've seen a good amount of demand coming from Iran for desis, which is a part of their staple diet. Like they said in Ethiopia, Iranians also use this as part of their daily nutrition.
They like the size.
They like the size, and believe it or not, there are more than 200 splitting plants. I was just learning this morning in Iran. I mean, small size splitting plants, but mainly for desis. So the consumption into Dubai of chickpeas, desi chickpeas is around 100,000 tons, 80 to 100,000 tons.
Wonderful. So we're seeing obviously some lift in consumption around the place. Is the lower prices are driving higher usage right now? Because I mean that's the economic theory, isn't it? Lower prices encourage more demand. So are we seeing that happen across a range of pulses, but in particular desis in India?
Definitely, desi demand is increasing with lower prices. Let's just take example of last year when the production estimates were 9 million tons against 7 million tons. So we had 2 million tons higher production in India. Still, we had record imports from Australia, 1.1 million tons. So the prices dropped from $1,100. Average annual price of 2016 was $1,100. In 2017, it was $750. Just the price drop of $400 pushed the demand for chickpeas higher by 2 million tons, 2 to 2.2 million tons. And if you look at the 6 years average demand growth in India, it's above 5% in terms of CAGR if you talk about.
Which is pretty good, right?
Which is pretty good, and it's mainly because if you look at the usage of chickpeas, it's in India we work basis 25% of the chickpea demand is for the whole consumption as a whole, where you just clean it, you boil it and eat it or make sprouts out of it or make snacks out of it. 25% is for splits, but 50% of chickpea consumption is coming from the gram flour, which is primarily going into the snack food. And the growth of snack food industry in India, of course, gram flour maybe forms a smaller part of the total snack food industry because you have potato chips, you have so many other things. It's 15 to 18% in last 10 years. Annualized growth is 15 to 18% in snack food industry. So 5% year-on-year growth in chickpeas is pretty accurate, I would say.
Very good. We heard Randy talk yesterday about avocados. Are we at risk of, as the hustle and bustle goes right across these demand centres, where's the opportunity for new products, new formulations? Because the desi fits right in that industrial slot in terms of flour and snack food and staple, chana masala and those sort of things in terms of end uses. Are we seeing a major migration into different formats or availability of the product in the market, or is it still relatively traditional?
I would still call it relatively traditional because avocado and all these products, of course, the demand for these products is growing in India, but we are talking about these products being consumed mainly in the metropolitan cities. So the demand may be shifting from pulses to, say, fast foods in the cities where people have more affordability and they have been consuming pulses like for years now. They are shifting to other products. But if you look at the income growth that India is having at the bottom of the pyramid, because like if you look at even the government mandate, they are trying to increase the income of the farmers. They are trying to increase the income of lower middle class, the poor people. They are as of now consuming just wheat and rice. For them, the next best source of nutrition is going to come from pulses. So I don't see a shift in the traditional demand from pulses to any other product if you look at overall basket put together.
Okay. Just quickly while I'm looking to my left, we've seen Pakistan come out with some non-tariff type barriers, some tweaking of phytosanitary requirements. Do you see there's any risk of contagion with Pakistan following India's lead in terms of more government intervention?
There has been a lot of government intervention in terms of the documentation requirements for imports of pulses into Pakistan. But as of now, our production of pulses is a lot less than our local demand, and we don't foresee that happening. Maybe we might see stricter regulations, but in terms of any possibility of import tariffs or import quotas, we don't see it on the horizon. And the primary reason is because Pakistan mainly produces desi chickpeas as the primary pulse item. Even for that, our production is a lot lower than our demand. And then if you speak about yellow peas, lentils, Kabuli chickpeas, we're totally dependent on imports. And pulses as a poor man's diet, if the government intervenes in this, then there's a high risk of prices skyrocketing.
Okay. And what about Bangladesh? Any risk of the Bangladeshi government getting involved in some of these things?
No. The government has an open policy. They want to keep prices as low as possible, and especially during Ramadan time. So that's starting from the 17th of May. The interesting thing about the chickpea consumption in Bangladesh is that 50% is consumed during this 1 month of Ramadan, and the other 50%, so 100,000 over 11 months and 100,000 during just 1 month. And the government tries to keep the prices as low as possible and keep the markets as open with least amount of intervention.
And Bharatji, it seems that with your prices higher than CFR values, you're not really being impacted by the government policy changes. Is that a fair comment on desis?
Not really, because the government, there have been impact in Ethiopia and another major producer, which is Tanzania. Tanzania exclusively produces to export to India.
Right.
So around 60,000 tons was produced last year, out of which roughly around...
That was 60,000?
60,000 tons. Out of which roughly around 30,000 could be exported. So there is a carryover stock of 30,000, and that has led to a reduced acreage this year. And we are seeing a reduction in the output as well, expected output, because the sowing would begin in August. So the expected output is going to go down by 20%. So definitely that has been an impact. One of the phytosanitary restrictions that the government of India has imposed on Ethiopia is the methyl bromide fumigation, right, where they have been given up till June. But to build the capacity, it would take at least 3 to 4 years for Ethiopia to build that capacity. So that has also affected export out of Ethiopia. So virtually Ethiopia is in a situation where neither Pakistan nor India, which are the major import destinations, is working because of the government policies. So I would say that the government policies have definitely impacted these two countries.
Okay. Look, we might move to the floor. We'll get the questions. I hope there are some questions. How much was the Australia? Precisely, it was about 845,000 tonnes last year, so it was a much smaller crop than 2016, where we knocked out nearly 2.2 million tonnes of desi chickpeas. So dry conditions absolutely impacted the productive outcomes at the end of last year. And as it stands today, we are very dry, and we've actually got very, very few desi chickpeas in the ground, and things will need to change rapidly for us to even achieve the numbers we achieved last year. Can Bangladesh prefer to buy Indian desi chickpeas instead of Australian chickpeas? Yeah, I mean, pure economic theory says that product moves from areas of surplus to deficit. But what will stop product moving to Bangladesh, or in fact...
Price is not the only consideration. It's a big consideration, but it would depend on the quality that India is offering. Bangladesh prefers bold size, light seed coat color, and clean product. So if India can offer that at a competitive price, then it's going to beat out Australia.
Sarab, can India do that? Nice golden colour, big, bold, just like Australian, best quality in the world.
So we do have that quality of chickpeas, but it's mainly produced in south, in Karnataka, in the Gulbarga region, and the crop size is very small. So, I mean, India cannot meet the exact quality specifications that Australia supplies.
Right.
Because the size of the seed for the Indian chickpeas is much smaller than the desi chickpeas that Australia grows.
Extending that question and bringing you, Bilal, into it, why can't Pakistan reliably receive Indian desi chickpeas to meet your shortfall?
So currently, we're unable to import any chickpeas from India because the plant quarantine is not issuing import permits for any Indian origin pulses. So, which is why currently Pakistan is looking towards Australia to meet the demand for desi chickpeas. And I'm not sure if the Indian desi chickpeas is workable for Pakistan at the current prices.
Okay. What is the present stock of desi chickpeas in Australia? How much of it is of lower quality, and which was affected by rains during harvest? Well, I think the technical term for how many desi chickpeas of good quality left in Australia is sweet bugger all, which translated for Randy is not much. So, you know, the numbers tell me that the crop there should be about 150 to 200,000 tonnes of old crop stock, some of which will have been affected by rainfall. But really, that's negligible. In fact, the stuff that's coming across our weighbridges is actually not too bad. The quality is reasonably sound. But it doesn't feel like there's that much product still left on farm in Australia. So I'm of the view that there's not that much product left. And that's why I say I think the old crop situation is very, very tight, and much tighter than even the impacts of the Indian sanctions, etc., will have us be concerned about. I certainly don't feel like Australia has burdensome stock. How many likes have we got there? What quantity of desis would be further required by Pakistan after local production? So you sort of crack at that.
Yeah, I think until the arrival of our next crop in April 2019, Pakistan can require anywhere between 200 to 300,000 tons of desi chickpeas. You know, factoring into account our local production. The crop just came out last month, and also incorporating the cargo that we have already booked. Now the main question is Pakistan going to import most of it from Africa, or would the prices in Australia be workable for us?
All right. This is obviously written by a buyer, given the fact that Australia exported close to 0.6, I think it was 0.65, and how they think they can liquidate their other 0.6 million tonnes before the new harvest. Well, if you can find those other 0.6 million metric tonnes, we'll have a crack at it, but I don't think it exists. Now, we need to get some likes going here because we're only getting very small likes. So, Todd Lees, you're there, I think. You should be liking this stuff, right? I think, Fahim, you answered that question, I think, didn't you? Just what you think we'll buy? Based on history, Bangladesh should actually be there for another 100,000, but you've already taken 160,000.
Well, I've got the arrival figures. Jan to December 2017, we did about 185K. Now, the first 4 months of 2018, the arrival figure is 153.587K. So if we look at historic figures, on the minimum 30,000, and on the maximum about another 50 to 70,000.
Yeah, so it's not small change. There's still a bit to go.
Yeah.
So we've got Bangladesh and we've got Pakistan to receive product. And of course, we might extend that question to the UAE. What do you think the UAE will take between now and the theoretical Australian new crop? Because today it's absolutely theoretical. So
I think we're mainly followers, so we're looking at what's happening in the world market and going hand to mouth. Most of the exporters and the importers now are very wary of price changes. They've lost a lot of money in the past. Some of the cargo is still lying on dock. So I think they're just going to go hand to mouth. So you might see, depending on how much is imported, as I said, the total import is around 80,000 tons. So whatever's remaining would be what they will import.
So based on the stats, that would leave you with about 50,000 to move in between now and the end of September.
I think it'll be much lesser.
You think it'll be less than that?
I think it'll be.
All right, thanks. Let's see how many likes we have now. Other than traditional Indian subcontinental markets, do you see any emerging markets for different destinations or uses? Will it be used for stock feed if supply stays high? Obviously it can be used for stock feed, but it would need to, the price would have to drop significantly. But from the panel, ideas for new uses for desis, or are you seeing some innovation in terms of the use of desis in how it's consumed?
I've been saying it through the whole conference. I think there is a very important point as part of the Colombo Accord, and many of the panelists here were agreeing that, many of the participants were agreeing that we need to look at another side of the coin, which is consumption. We have a lot of supply in the world, which is not going to go away very soon. And Sudhakar mentioned yesterday that there's 3 grams of per capita consumption worldwide. So I think the whole shift of our thinking should be how can we increase consumption and how can we have new avenues of consumption for pulses, rather than worrying about where the stock is going to go. So snack food could be one very important part. Saurabh mentioned earlier that a lot of the population now, young population, is moving towards fast food and new types of proteins. So we need to find innovative ways of bringing them back into pea proteins and lentil proteins. So I think this is a question which is open-ended. But definitely a challenge.
Look, and I think that's a great comment to make, because when I first started coming to these conferences, we just talked about straight-out commodity, traditional usages, and now we are talking about fractionalisation and how that base and how that flour performs relative to other flours in particularly snack food, and we're obviously seeing snack food grow globally, and people do want, there's a big free-from market developing, free from gluten, free from this, free from that, and pulses, particularly desis, fit right in there. What about in India, the largest market? What sort of innovation are you seeing? We have vegetable burgers, patties. What else are you seeing?
Yes, we do have seen chickpea burgers in few snack food centers, but it's not catching up in a big way yet. But definitely health consciousness is increasing in a big way in India, and it's still a metropolitan phenomena where more and more people are moving towards a gluten-free diet. When they go for a gluten-free diet, their consumption for pulses increases.
So I think what we're seeing, I can't see Randy here, but clearly there's an opportunity for a smashed chickpea sandwich or burger. Right, G?
I think in India, a few months back, there was a political controversy about the Prime Minister saying pakoda becho. They sell pakodas, and pakodas are made of desi chickpeas. I don't know if that's an innovation. Just to push the production of chickpeas up.
Start promoting pakoras, get the Prime Minister on the job.
Yeah.
All right. Another question for Saurabh. Has the India domestic chickpea price bottomed? Good time to buy position. Another buyer.
It's difficult to time the market, but definitely the prices are very close to the bottom. And for anybody who wants to buy chickpeas, this is the only time in the decade that Indian government is on your side. They want you to buy chickpeas so that the prices can go to the near MSP levels. So Indian government is looking for support from the trade to buy chickpeas.
So I think that's a definite yes. It's time to buy chickpeas, everybody. All right. Okay, effect of Mr. Trump's sanctions. Ooh, that's a sticky one. I reckon for him, not for him. I think you are probably the best position to pontificate on the effect of those sanctions.
I think Trump is a pretty smart guy, you know. He says first, he calls him Rocket Man, then he shakes hand with him. Then they said the market's going to collapse after he comes to power, and then the American market's doing very well. I think this may be a ploy, you know. Maybe he's just saying something against Iran. Next week comes with something better, sweetened deal. I mean, you never know.
You think Donald will be in Tehran next week or something?
I don't know. But with him, yeah, anything is possible. But no, generally speaking, I think it's going to play havoc with the markets, especially with the imports. So what generally happens is there's a big squeeze on the currency, so they can't really bring cargo in. So it's an opportunity for UAE. I mean, Dubai is going to become again a re-export hub. Smaller players will be out of the market again. And not to forget, they can also replace daisies with Kabulis. So the Russian Kabulis also have a chance of getting in from the top, and Kazakhstan, because in their daily staple diet, they also like Kabulis if the price is okay. So if they cannot get it, they have to find it somewhere else or find alternatives. So I think it's not going to be good generally for consumption. You're going to find 30 to 50,000 tons disappearing from the market quite easily.
Yeah, and we certainly don't need to lose that demand. Well, I guess we have to wait a little bit until we see how the Europeans respond to the United States position. So, but
I think it's also going to help increase, consumption from Pakistan through Pakistan as well, because in the past there was a lot of border trade between Iran and Pakistan, where the cargo would go into Iran through the border. So if these sanctions go into effect, then we can see this trade happening through unofficial channels via Pakistan.
That's a very good point, because it was certainly happening before Thunder Bus opened up. So that's a great point, Bilal. Right, how much more? I think we answered that one. Does Australia Desi chickpeas production area squeezing, reducing for next sowing in 2018? If yes, then what are the reasons behind this reduction in area? Look, there's no question. Farmers in Australia, given half a chance, will plant Desi chickpeas. They like putting a pulse in the rotation. It's a religious experience for many farmers. They like Desi chickpeas. Desis perform very well in much of northern Australia, where we have our deep soils and nice beaches, etc. But at the end of the day, those soils are very dry today. So it's entirely academic. We need an enormous amount of rain to achieve even last year's production. I would say that there's less than, I'm going to throw it out there, 10 or 15% of the area that could be sown to Desis could actually be sown deeply into moisture. Most of the rest of the area is either just far too dry or not within 4 or 5 inches of rain of getting a plant. So we need to watch this space over the next 4 to 6 weeks. The seeding window is just opening, but we're very dry. So if we don't get any rain, then we'll be talking about an Australian-driven Desi chickpea rally because of a lack of supply. We can quite easily go back to a 300,000 or 400,000 tonne outcome based on our seasonal conditions right now. In fact, the most of the east coast is dry, so that impacts lentils and faba beans as well. So don't get bearish based on Australian supply.
Peter, I have a question for you, actually.
Oh my God, that's not allowed, I don't think, is it? Where's Randy?
This is a lot of participants have been asking me, over the last 3 days. So we talk a lot about government intervention. I'm sorry for taking the floor from you, but this was interesting. So,
as long as it's not a hard question.
We talk a lot about government intervention and in the Colombo Accord and other things, and all these factors. So I'm quite curious. What if there was no intervention at all? Free market. We discussed this morning. We didn't have a reply to it, but I'm just trying to brainstorm and see what if there was absolutely no intervention. The Colombo Accord actually worked. Government said, you know what? It's a free market. Do what you want. Grow how much you want. Sell how much you want. I think this is something interesting, right? To think about what would be the final effect. Is it really good not to have intervention, or is it good to have controlled intervention? I think we're veering away from the topic, but just.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. We did talk about it this morning, but I guess where would the market be today if in fact the market was free? So Sarah, starting with you, where would you think the market would be in terms of CFR Navashiva prices if in fact there was no intervention at all and we were where we are today?
If there was no government intervention in India, then the prices in India for all pulses will be much lower than where they are today. And the objective of the government to get the Indian pulse production higher will be completely defeated. because there is global surplus for peas, lentils, and if India had not put the duty or say restriction, then pea values at $260, $270, I'm sure chickpea prices in India, which are currently at 35,000, 36,000, would have been below 30,000.
Yeah,
So,
I think that's reasonable. I think the prices, the CFR prices could actually be lower than what they are today. But I guess some of these changes occurred after most of, certainly from an Australian perspective, goods had been shipped, which means that we haven't seen the full impact of these changes. If we were to have a lot of rain and we seeded a crop to produce 800 or 900,000 tonnes at the end of 2018, then potentially the impact on Australia wouldn't be seen or won't be seen until the end of this year or early next year. So it's an interesting question, but I think I agree with Sarah. What would you say, Bilal?
I think pulses prices in Pakistan would equate to the prices in India because being such a close neighbor, any pulse item exported to Pakistan from India can arrive in within 2 days. So I would say whatever the prices of all pulses would be in India, Pakistan would be reflective of something similar.
Yep. We've got 10 seconds left on the clock here. Non-GMO endorsement. That's already happening, and Australia can provide a side letter, I believe, with regards to the fact there is no GMO desis in production. Mr. Sarah, please advise on 2018. Yeah, we answered that, I think. I think that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen, and gentlemen of the panel. I thank you very much, and I thank our audience for being very engaged throughout, and look forward to the balance of the convention.
Step forward and give us a photograph. Sure, Peter. Yes. Okay.
Once a great panel, ladies and gentlemen. Good information, and this is the last panel for the day, but full of information and keeping it very interesting right up to the really end. Before you leave the hall, got to tell you a couple of things that we will reconvene here this evening at 7 o'clock for the gala closing reception, which will be right here in the hall. We will be redoing this hall for the gala closing, so when you leave the hall, please ensure to take all your collaterals with you, because this entire hall will be redone for the gala closing. Also to remind you that if in case you missed the gala tonight, that we start tomorrow at 9:30 with the registrations, 10 o'clock with the first session on black mat pay. Of course, we'll be closing by lunch. And just to remind you that in case you haven't yet made arrangements for checking out or departure to the hotel or wherever you're going, from the hotel to the airport, where you're going, you can do that tonight and be ready for a great day tomorrow. With that, it's a conclusion of this second day.
Gentlemen, if you exit from that side. Yeah, thank you, sir. Sir.
Conclusion of second day, Pulses 18, Colombo. Thank you once again, ladies and gentlemen, and do remember to please take all your collaterals with you as you exit the hall. We'll be requiring the hall absolutely empty to start off this evening's gala. Thank you, and bye for now. Just a quick reminder about the gala this evening. When you come back, do remember to get your either your delegate badges or your entry tickets. Remember to get your entry badges, your delegate badges or your entry tickets with you.